Number 10, Canadian Secret Service? Who's responsible in the comics for giving us this version of Vision? That is a complicated question to answer because it actually was a bunch of people who appeared to be someone that they weren't. The people who kidnapped Vision approached Mockingbird initially for her help and appeared to her to be working for the usual secret organization that we all suspect, S.H.I.E.L.D. After she found out their true plot, however, she was locked up and realized based on the appearance of her cell alone that they were actually KGB. Later on, we discovered that it wasn't KGB, but actually a Canadian spy working for the Canadian Secret Service in league with various other operatives from secret services all over the world. Together, they created a group known as Vigilance, who were formed after Vision had revealed how powerful he was when he took control of the world's computers. Hold on, do we even have a Secret Service here in Canada? Oh, apparently we do. You'd think we'd be one of the least secretive acronyms out there, CSI, but they're actually the CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service. I also just love how secret intelligence operations are still Googleable. Are they really that secret then? Number 9, Immortus. That's right, while Vigilance was responsible for the actual deed of capturing and dismantling Vision, they in turn were being manipulated into doing so by one of the Avengers' biggest bads in comics, Immortus. Immortus is a time-traveling villain who is known by many different names, including Kang the Conqueror, depending on where he is in his own timeline when he shows up. In the comics, it was revealed that the true identity of this villain was none other than the young hero Iron Lad all grown up. Many therefore speculate that White Vision's appearance in the MCU could therefore imply that Immortus or Kang, who we know will appear in the next Ant-Man film, could actually be responsible somehow for manipulating Sword's actions, influencing them from behind the scenes to create White Vision and go after Wanda. It's all part of his master plan. Since in the comics it was Immortus all along for this plot. Not Agatha all along for this one. I know, disappointing, because I like that song. Number 8, dismantled scene in WandaVision. While I have speculated a few times in the past about what the true identity or allegiance of director Tyler Hayward is in WandaVision, is he working for or some other version of Kang? Is he part of AIM? Is he Mephisto? This time around, when it comes to a specific scene, though, in WandaVision, compared to the comics, Hayward actually plays the role of Mockingbird. Huh? Near the end of issue 43 of the West Coast Avengers, you see Mockingbird lead Scarlet Witch to where her husband is being kept, only for it to be revealed that he has been completely and utterly dismantled. Oh no. Better a widow. Actually, a much more gruesome scene in comparison to the version we saw in the show, in my opinion. Here, however, Mockingbird isn't trying to keep Wanda from Vision. She's returned to the Avengers team to try and help them after being led astray by someone who she thought worked for S.H.I.E.L.D., but who was in reality using her as a pawn. So a similar role really only in terms of their purpose in that one scene, as Hayward definitely does not seem to want to help Wanda when she bursts into Sword looking to reclaim Vision's lifeless body after the events of Infinity War and Endgame. Well, I mean, I think he does want to help her. He wants to help her bring Vision back, I think, but he doesn't want to, give her Vision's body to bury. He's like, no. Number 7, being controlled. The smallest spoilers ahead for WandaVision if you know nothing about it, but mostly this part is pretty safe as we'll just be focusing kind of on the premise of the show and what we know of it so far based on what has been implied in the episodes. So it's more of if you know the show, you probably know this. In WandaVision, it's implied that Scarlet Witch, Wanda herself, is in complete control of everything going on in Westview, including Vision's appearance and existence there. After all, as we talked about before, Vision's appearance there likely means that Wanda manipulated him and brought him back to life, possibly even reanimating his lifeless corpse. Yikes. As the show unfolds, Vision becomes more suspicious of his life in Westview and Wanda and her involvement not just in it, but in manipulating it as well with her reality-altering powers. Also, I never noticed this before, but Westview's name actually seems to be a reference to the initial of the main characters of the show and the show title itself. Westview, WV. WandaVision, WV. Interesting. Also, it's weird that it took me so long to notice that, but I just noticed it today, so I was looking for all kinds of other explanations as to what Westview meant. I never thought about the initials. Number 6. No emotions. The second time that Hank brought Vision back, he managed to reprogram him with all the information he would need about the Avengers so that he would come back as an ally, a friend, a hero, much closer to his older self, but something huge was still missing. In the MCU, it's likely that Vision's Mind Stone will be that vital ingredient, but in the comics, it was actually his brain patterns or his brain waves, which were taken from Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man, when he was originally created. Unfortunately, this time around, Simon didn't want to cooperate. He felt that his brain waves, which gave Vision his soul, had been taken without his consent before, and this time he didn't want to give them up, feeling it was kind of like a violation of his own soul. And so the Vision came back without any emotions. Even though Wanda tried to be like, but he's my husband and I love him, please help. Simon was like, yeah, he's like my brother, but no. Number 5, The Last Avengers. This version of Vision comes to us from the Last Avengers story series. Here, something so traumatic happened one day that Vision basically just gave up on living. He stayed permanently phased and let his molecules drift far apart, making it near impossible for anyone to track him down. However, the Avengers needed him in one final fight, and so the daughter of Wyatt Wingfoot and She-Hulk, Jessie, and Hank Pym attempted to find him so that he could join them in one final stand. Tommy, Vision's son, however, who now appears in the future to have become Sorcerer Supreme, shows up at the last minute with more exact calculations to help them, having been trying to locate his father ever since he went missing years ago, following the tragic event which seems to have happened at Tommy's wedding. What happened to make Vision completely lose it? It seems that Quicksilver killed Scarlet Witch. Vision's other son, Billy, also ends up becoming the villain Grim Reaper in this reality and joining forces with Kang the Conqueror. Now, in case you're wondering, yeah, in this reality, Tommy is the one who inherits his mother's mystical powers. And if you're thinking, oh man, I just got the names mixed up, I didn't. It's weird in this reality and they're kind of swapped. Tommy's magical, Billy's a villain. It's weird, but that's why it's an alternate reality. Anything can happen there. Number 4, Arc Reactor? Some theorize that in the middle of White Vision from the MCU's forehead, where the Mind Stone would normally be, he instead has an arc reactor. It lies just beneath the surface of his synthetic skin, making it kind of hard to see whether the triangular light is actually an arc reactor or not. If it were though, it could be being used to continually power White Vision, whereas Wanda's chaos magic taken from the drone was simply the kickstart they needed as to the full power source, similar to what Thor's hammer provided when Vision was initially created in the Age of Ultron. We know that Wanda, after all, has the full potential of her powers unlocked by the Mind Stone, and the Mind Stone played basically a big part in giving Vision life. This would also make a ton of sense that Wanda's magic is connected to that stone, considering that when she destroyed Vision the first time around, it didn't hurt him. He said that he felt only her. It would also make sense as to why she perhaps can't sense Vision when she visits his corpse at SWORD headquarters, because he no longer has the Mind Stone. They are both connected to the Mind Stone. But if it is an arc reactor supplying the constant power and not Wanda's magic, then what does this mean for their future connection? Also, how did SWORD get Stark's technology? Will we potentially see the Armor Wars story arc find its way into the MCU? Number 3, infected with a Hydra virus. During the events of Secret Empire, Steve Rogers would end up having his whole life history rewritten and be revealed as a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra. Our heroes would, however, find out too late about Rogers' true allegiances, and so Captain America would become Captain Hydra, or Hydra Supreme, and would take over the United States of America for the glory of Hydra. But he would also end up recruiting some of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, including Scarlet Witch and Vision. But how did he convince them to join the side of evil? Well, he didn't. For Wanda, Hydra actually awoke Chthon within her in order to take control of her body and make use of her powers. And if you want to learn more about Chthon and that whole thing, you can check out the worst things that happened to Wanda's list, where we talk about that a bit more. For Vision, being a synthezoid, they merely infected him with a virus. That was easy. And although Vision tried to fight it, he remained unable to break free and fight against Hydra until near the end of the event. Like the second last issue, I believe, in the main one. Secret Empire number 9. Number 2, Vision's marriage. White Vision still respected Wanda and their relationship, but he couldn't love her. It wasn't possible due to his lack of emotional response. This caused a great amount of distance to open up between the couple, and put a lot of strain on their relationship. Eventually, the two would break up, with Vision heartlessly doing so over the phone, asking Wonder Man to kind of pass the message along, basically to Wanda while she was in recovery. We see this difficult time in their relationship revisited in Tom King's Vision, when Scarlet Witch which pleads with Vision to explain what has happened to him to their children, and Vision basically responds that they're no longer his children. You can check out this heartbreaking moment in issue 7 of 2016's Vision series, and the brutal breakup moment in issue 63 of Avengers West Coast, the renamed but continuation of the 80s West Coast Avengers series. Avengers West Coast, I feel like, is a weird name change that they did, but hey, it happened. Number 1, Vision Quest. If you really want to get up to speed about exactly how White Vision came to be and was resurrected and created, an important story to touch on in the comics would be the West Coast Avenger arc, Vision Quest. This story took place from issue 42 to 45 of the 1985 West Coast Avengers comic series. And if you've been checking out all the lists, they've probably brought it up before, but yeah, you should go and read it. Seriously, go back, read it, check it out. It follows the journey of Scarlet Witch as she searches for her missing husband and discovers that he was kidnapped and dismantled. We then see Hank Pym and Wonder Man do their best to reconstruct Vision and follow along as a new version of him is reborn. For the beginnings of this chapter in Vision's life, this is one of the best places to start. And then you can kind of go up from there, because yeah, there is quite a few White Vision things that happen after that.
Number 10, the football game. To kick off this list, pun intended, we go back to the golden age of comics with Jay Barrick to Flash Comics issue 1. So back in the 50s, the issue opens up with Jay trying to get the attention of Joan, but she's not interested, all because he sucks at football. In her words, she even says, "A man of your build and brains could be a star." Both tridents hurt. Oh no, whatever shall we do? Aha. And then in comes the super speedster just to ruin the game for the rest of the guys who've trained for like 16 years of their life to get there. And I love how happy he is too at this moment. Like, he's clearly been waiting for this his entire life. Like, he just flies through touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. One guy on the other team has the right idea. He straight up quits. And the game ends being 65-30. I mean, save some action for the rest of us, Jay. We warmed up for like 2 hours, come on. And before we move on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps us a lot here, and it's right there. It's right somewhere down there. It's that one. It looks like a hand with a thumb. It's hard to miss. All right, thank you. Now back to the list. Number 9, Super Kids. Nothing beats a family outing. Either that means a trip to the movies or battling monsters with your super kids. That's right, once Wally West and his family returned from a fun little Speed Force trip, his kids had powers. How fun. Now, being so young, there's the Incredibles type question. Should they be allowed to be superheroes? Well, in the Flash Volume 2, issue 233, Wally comes up with the mindset that speedsters age differently, and sometimes it's hard to understand how much longer they have to live. So Wally thinks it's best to let them do what they want because YOLO, am I right? And it's a pretty cute issue, like the kids are eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, trying to fuel up for the fight. In the first few pages, Iris even admits that she stole the sandwich from a fat kid, so everybody wins. Those are her words, not mine. God, I should add another point to this list just for that line. What a savage. Number 8, the loop of life. Everybody has that one memory they wish they could just delete from their brain. Like maybe you were late for work and then you spilled your coffee all over your lovely flannel shirt. Now, what if you had to relive that nightmare over and over, Groundhog Day style? Well, that's what happens to Zoom. In Flash issue 200, Wally West uses his powers to defeat him, but he freezes him and makes him repeat the worst day of his life over and over and over again. Now, this is why I want to be a speedster. This issue right here. I would love to do this. I would just make everybody chill out in their favorite memory and just kind of lay low. Maybe a couple I'd put in some embarrassing memories, you know? Of course, I mean, I'm a human. Like, he looks like he's in so much pain. You could just tell by the dramatic one teardrop. This is literal hell that he's in. He just sits and repeats the line, "He doesn't have a gun, trust me, Ashley," over and over. Poor Hunter Zolomon. I mean, he's not the best guy in the world, but you can't help for feeling somewhat bad. I mean, he's a human. And number 7, more mind games. Yes, of course, we go back to that same issue, Flash 200, where he puts forth this amazing plan to mess with everybody's mind. So now at this point, the Flash thinks, you know what, it's probably best if everybody just forgets who he is. Not too bad of an idea. So he gets some help from the Spectre and Hal Jordan. They talk it out, and Wally figures if he mind wipes everybody, all will be good. Bang bang, boom. Well, Wally ends up forgetting who the Flash is as well, for a short amount of time. So with everybody not knowing about the Flash causes the opposite reaction. There's more crime. No speedsters in the way. Hey, let's go rob some shit. And number 6, death is cool. Flash Comics issue 1, this time it's in the shape of Jay Garrick. So Flash decides it's a smart idea to go and attack a group of villains. Now at this point it's early in the comics and he's just now buckling down with the responsibilities of his new powers. So he goes, I'll go after them, let's do it. So what does he do? He ends up in a chase with a villain named Sir Satan. Cool name. And then he runs his car off the road, literally runs it off the road. Then there he was in terrible shape in the burning car, and Jay, furthermore wanting to take on the superhero responsibilities, decides not to help but to rather just look cool. Like at least collect his teeth off the dashboard first, you know? Fix his hair, maybe ask him if he needs a band-aid or two. I get it though. If I took down a supervillain, I'd probably talk some shit. I'd do monologues. I would do like Shakespeare monologues while he's burning in his car.
Starting us off in at number 10, Black Flash. The actual physical representation of death for all speedsters, Black Flash is the Grim Reaper of the Speed Force. Making his first appearance in The Flash Volume 2, number 138 back in 1998, he was seen before the deaths of several speedsters including Barry Allen, Johnny Quick, and Bart Allen. But he also tried to return Wally West to the Speed Force, but was unsuccessful, taking Linda Park instead, Wally's girlfriend. Black Flash eventually did return to try to claim Wally again, freezing time for everyone without a connection to the Speed Force to do so, but thanks to the combined efforts of multiple speedsters, Wally was able to race Black Flash until the end of time, causing death to have no meaning. The CW Black Flash, which was really just Hunter Zolomon aka Zoom, was killed during season 3 when Savitar lured him out of the Speed Force and then Killer Frost froze him, resulting in her first kill that actually turned out to be her ex as well. Dare I say, ice cold. But that didn't stop the Speed Force anyway, since later on Barry Allen returned in the Flash Rebirth storyline in the comics, becoming the new Black Flash. So this is also a version of the original Flash as well as a separate entity. In at 9, Godspeed. August Hart is the former detective partner of Barry Allen. August was the only witness to Barry's accident that turned him into the Flash, and while going after a criminal organization called the Black Hole, August was struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City. August became the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed, and got his revenge on the man who he suspected to have killed his brother. He had given up on the justice system since his brother's killer had gone free and, with his newfound power, had the ability to become judge, jury, and executioner. August realized after he had gotten his powers that he also had the ability to steal others' speed, though for a time he could only do it by killing them. He practiced this skill to be able to do it non-lethally as well though. With his new godlike speed, August was able to move so fast as to create duplicates of himself at any given time, allowing him to give the illusion that he and Godspeed were different people, which is pretty damn sick, considering the alternatives are Speed Mirage and Time Remnant, which aren't exactly the same thing but are still fairly similar. In at 8, Inertia. The bitter feud between the Allen family and the Thawne family would span generations. Even in the 30th century, President Thawne sought to recruit Bart Allen in his revenge campaign against the Allens, since Bart was half Thawne himself. When that failed, Thawne mixed Bart's DNA with Thawne's genetic material to create a speedster clone who he named Thaddeus Thawne. Whereas Bart grew in a hyper-accelerated world, Thaddeus' childhood was the exact opposite, because of course it was, he's the reverse. His development was super slow, which led the young speedster to become more calculated and methodical. Thaddeus was also taught to hate the Allen family, and Impulse in particular. In addition to this modification, Thaddeus' growth and development was slowed. This is in contrast to Bart's accelerated development. However, after killing Bart, Wally West had other plans. Upon hearing of Bart's death, an enraged Flash hunted Inertia down. Though he thought of killing him, Flash decided instead to do something worse. He used his abilities to slow Inertia's movements down to the point where he was totally immobile, essentially a living statue, and then he placed Inertia on display at the Flash Museum facing statues of Bart Allen as Impulse and Kid Flash. He could still think, see, and hear in normal time, but was frozen in place. Inertia was then just doomed to spend an eternity in a state of near total paralysis, staring at images of the guy he killed. And in 7, Earth X. There's little known about the Earth X version of Barry Allen. Known as Blitzkrieg in this reality, he's a fascist version of the Flash working alongside Dark Arrow and Overgirl, the Oliver Queen and Kara Zor-El of Earth X, who are also married, but that's a story for another day. In the Arrow vs. Crisis on Earth X crossover, Earth X Barry is actually nowhere to be seen. Instead, he's replaced by Reverse Flash, the Eobard Thawne of Earth 1. Even though on the animated show The Ray, which takes place on Earth X, there is a fascist Barry, so what happened? It's largely assumed that between his last appearance in the show and in the crossover, that Thawne Thawne arrived and took his chance to kill at least a version of Barry, even if it wasn't his own. Hence why the other Earth Xers were so trusting of Thawne, since he had bested their Barry. I don't know how this Barry got his powers without the particle accelerator, but what I do know is that even the Joker refused to work with the Red Skull when he realized that he was actually a fascist and not some kook in a wildly inappropriate costume, saying that he may be a psychopath, but he's an American psychopath, or something along those lines. So, Reverse Flash is worse than Joker confirmed. Like, this wasn't even a Reverse Flash who was raised in the fascist life. He just wanted to help out, which is messed up as hell. And at 6, Zoom. Hunter Zolomon was a serial killer from Earth 2, also known as the maniacal super speedster known as Zoom. Having gotten tired of being the villain, Hunter decided to also become the hero after capturing Jay Garrick, the Flash from Earth 3, masquerading as Jay to gain Barry Allen's trust. When he was 11, Hunter saw his father kill his mother. Hunter's father ended up in jail, and Hunter was raised in the foster care system since no relative wanted him. Hunter later became a convicted serial killer and was going through electroshock therapy when Earth 2 Harrison Wells' particle accelerator exploded underground. This ended up connecting him to the Speed Force and he escaped. Zolomon killed some police officers on his way out and left one to tell his story. The one police officer said he saw a man zooming around, giving Zolomon the alias of Zoom. Zoom later then killed that police officer in his house. And at 10, The Flash. Now, The Flash has fought alternate versions of himself a lot, and I mean a lot. But I think that the most interesting time was when it was him from an alternate future where Wally West had died. And this future Barry's solution was to come back and kill his past self so the timeline of events that caused Wally to die wouldn't happen. Yeah, I still don't understand it either. However, to gain enough speed, Barry has to kill all of his rogues, including Gorilla Grodd, Mirror Master, and Captain Cold, who he just like sits with as he dies. It's weird. I also don't get how going on a killing spree helps you gain more speed, but whatever, maybe Reverse Flash did it. He eventually does gain enough speed and runs back in time to try to kill himself. But both the present Barry and a future version of Wally West fight off future Barry, and future Barry gets killed. But before dying, he's able to mutter Thawne in an attempt to explain that Thawne killed his mother. Yeah, gotta love comics, right? They make so much sense. And at 9, Mecha Vibe. I will admit the Flash TV show has gone in some interesting directions recently. However, the most recent season saw Barry lose basically all of his emotions for a time while trying to build an artificial Speed Force. But this ended up causing Barry to be very logical but also weirdly impulsive, becoming a form of pseudo-villain for a couple episodes. But when choosing to take only Iris out of the Mirrorverse, the team retaliates and tries to stop him. But in the process, Barry absolutely destroys all of them because he literally can predict where a ball will appear before it's thrown. He just puts his hand up and then there's a ball that will just bounce in random directions that Cisco throws, and then he doesn't move his hand and catches it. Like, what? Gotta love that speed thinking. And you know, it's not like that would have helped against DeVoe or anything. Gotta love when they introduce new abilities that would have really helped previously, huh? Oh, and that damn copyright neutral lightsaber battle in the finale, seriously? That had to be the most ridiculous bull I've ever seen on this show. Like, I thought Godspeed was gonna pull some like sick ass Zeus bull and like start like grab the lightning and like start throwing it, but no, he made a lightning saber. This show, man. And at 8, Green Arrow. Okay, so during the Elseworlds crossover event, Flash and Green Arrow swapped their powers. So Oliver Queen became the Flash and Barry Allen became the Green Arrow. Yet even with that, Barry was in essence still his old self until he started having to take on a darker personality in order to be the Green Arrow. Before doing this, however, he did finally get his revenge on Oliver after around 6 years. In the very first crossover, Flash vs. Arrow, we saw Oliver training Barry on how to case an environment. He did so by placing remote control crossbows in a field and told Barry to catch an arrow. After he did, the remote control crossbows shot Barry in the back. Literally. Barry, however, got his revenge in Elseworlds where he did the same thing to Oliver on Earth 38, when training Oliver on how to use his speed. I don't know how he got the bows there, because like, I mean, it was another Earth, but it still counts. He also beat the Amazo robot after it had gained the abilities of Green Arrow among others, so that certainly counts as well. And at 7, Other Flashes. When Wally goes berserk and starts killing other speedsters, you know it's gonna be an interesting issue. Yeah, in the Future State storyline, we see some Flashes including Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, and Max Mercury fighting off various thugs with blasters, swords, and futuristic torpedo grenades. But one of the speedsters gets injured and they have to retreat. They later, for some reason, get inside each other's dreams and end up in some psychic plane of existence where Wally ends up finding them somehow. It also seems to be like a version of Wally that's also Black Flash, or like maybe it's Black Flash disguising, I don't know. Either way, this version of Wally absolutely rips through the entire Flash family, feeding on their psychic forms, and honestly, that's enough for me to put it on this list, so just cause like I don't want it to happen to me. And at 6, Kid Flash. In season 3 of The Flash, Barry kinda gave up on his responsibilities because he was scared of losing Iris. Like, I get it, the girl you've been pining after for years had finally admitted that she had feelings for you, but then you went and changed the timeline, so losing her would definitely end up sucking. But you don't give all the responsibility of saving her to her little brother that Godspeed because you changed the timeline. Damn, season 3 was weird. However, in season 3, episode 12, Barry and Wally have a race to keep Wally's training going. Things seem fairly even until they come to a building that they need to run over. Barry faces through the wall, but since Wally doesn't know how to do that, he has to run over the building. Funny. Wally has to run over a wall. Wall. Either way, Barry ends up winning and Wally complains because he phased. But then Barry responds with the best line of, "What's my name?" Since prior he was mentioning how he was called the fastest man alive. Also, I want to just say that they were betting on this race and Caitlin bet more on Barry than Iris did. So maybe I should have let Savitar win. Just saying.
And number 5, Prison Break. We go now to the Flash 164 from 1987, and the cover of the page shows Flash being put in the Slammer. Ooh, the Flash is stuck in this mirror dimension where he doesn't exist, so there's a lot of questions floating around for the Flash. Now, instead of using his super speed to exit the station and figure out a game plan, he super kicks everybody's ass. I mean, this world thinks that all superheroes are evil. Way to prove their point right off the bat. The Flash even says, "I gotta keep my cool. No matter where I am, I'm not gonna scrap with police." And then he immediately hoofs one of them in the jaw, breaking the shield guard on his mask. Number 4, ignoring a call for help. Flash 89 in 1994, Volume 2, Wally West was involved in a civil lawsuit. The plaintiff, Allison Armitage, was injured so badly while Wally was out kicking ass that she ended up having to get her legs amputated. That's how bad this ended up. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough, she said Wally West ignored her when she cried out for help. That of course caused her injury. She wanted $20 million for the whole case. Allison's lawyer was none other than the villain Abracadabra. So Wally thinks that there's something fishy going on, and the Barry Allen Foundation made an agreement that Wally can't use the Flash outfit or persona. Quite the punishment if you ask me, jeez. You're grounded, bucko. But don't worry, him and Allison come to an agreement in the next issue, but regaining the ability to walk was not included in said agreement. Now the best part of this issue has to be the court scene. The Flash goes nuts. He's asked if he did everything he could, and he's like, "I'm fast as lightning." And they're like, "Yes, but did you do what you could?" And he's like, "I'm super fast though. I don't know." And number 3, killed Reverse Flash. Flash issue 324, we have the Trial of the Flash storyline, and the cover of the issue is enough to make you want to pick it up and take a peek. We find Barry as he sets for holy matrimony with Fiona Webb. Now, leading up to what's supposed to be the happiest day of your life, Reverse Flash starts leaving creepy messages for Barry. One message literally spells out in big letters, "Guess who's gonna kill your wife again?" with a question mark that looks like a 2. Maybe he's going too fast, couldn't do it. Yeah, Reverse Flash had done that previously, but this time, he doesn't just punch him in the head a few times and talk smack. No, this time, he changes it up a bit and breaks his neck. And afterwards, Barry was arrested. The police officer comes in and literally says, "Oh, I don't like the angle of that neck." Like, how many, like, he's like, "Hey, I've seen some necks in my time, rookie. That's a bent neck." I sleep on this neck quite funny, so whenever I see bent necks, I'm always like, ooh, I feel like the bent neck lady. Now, of course, it was an accident, but it still happened, and it's still pretty violent, so you gotta include it. And number 2, immobile inertia. So at the start of this video, I mentioned the name Bart Allen. Bart is the grandson of Barry Allen. Now, at this time, there's nobody like Barry or Wally to take the mantle of the Flash. He skipped the whole teenage years thing and went right to being an adult. Speedsters are wild, thus becoming the Flash for a small amount of time. Because the evil speedster Inertia, aka Thaddeus Thawne, killed Bart Allen. This evil clone of Bart Allen is responsible for him being gunned down. So when Wally West returned, he was pretty angry. But instead of killing him, he freezes Inertia, making him this sentient statue, and added to the Flash Museum, just blinking and breathing for eternity. Of course, staring at Bart Allen the whole time. Quite the punishment, I like it. I'm here for it, as the kids would say. And finally, number 1, Flashpoint, one of the biggest upcoming DC movies, and for good reason, the Flashpoint storyline, where the Flash tries to go back in time to save his mother from dying her tragic death. Not a bad idea at all. I'd probably try and do that too. This story was released in 2011, written by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert, and starts with Barry waking up with no Flash powers. Interesting. In fact, the Flash doesn't even exist. Everything has changed. His mother, Nora, was still alive. Score! And his father, Henry, died 3 years prior. Not score. Yeah, in his own timeline, his father's actually alive. He's just in jail. There's no Justice League at this point, and Superman isn't even in the picture. The best part? And one plot point that we're most looking forward to is that Batman in this universe is actually Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father. So Bruce ended up dying that night instead of his parents. So this caused his mother Martha to go insane, and then she ended up becoming the Joker, and that's why during the opening credits of Batman vs Superman, we're all hyped in the audience because we see Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohen, two amazing actors in such a small opening scene with no dialogue. Interesting. Now, with recent news of Michael Keaton set to return in that storyline, Jeffrey Dean Morgan took to the internet and said, "Michael Keaton swooped in and took my gig." Nah, I think that's super cool. Ever since Zack Snyder walked away, my whole kind of bit in that world has walked away with him. However, there's always a chat going on. God, I hope Jeffrey Dean Morgan would be the best Dark Batman. Like, we've kind of been waiting for a long time. Just do it, just do it. So we shall see, fingers crossed. I think that movie's coming out June 2nd, 2022. For now, I mean, let's all wear masks. Maybe we'll see it sooner. Just an idea.
Number 10, Mainframe. This version of Vision comes to us from the alternate reality of Earth 691. Here, the world faced devastation when Martians invaded. Knowing Earth would be unable to stop them, instead of staying and doing his best to help people, Vision fled, abandoning billions of people who would end up dead in the battle, including most of Earth's superheroes. Vision also appeared to take with him this alternate Earth's Wonder Man, forcibly teleporting him to safety despite the fact that he wanted to stay and fight to the end. How cruel. Vision then merged his mind with the computerized world known as Klaatu and gave up his body, becoming the all-powerful Mainframe. Number 9, Red Vision. Red Vision comes to us from the Amalgam universe and was an amalgamation of DC's Red Tornado and Marvel's Vision. Similar to Vision's own backstory, Red Vision's backstory was that he was a synthetic man created to infiltrate the heroic Judgment League Avengers, only to later betray them. Although his intended purpose for existing was quite dark, much like his comic book counterparts, he was destined to become a hero. An air elemental took possession of the android body, bonding with it and becoming a hero and a force of good. Number 8, Jonas. Jonas just wanted to be a hero, but alas, in the end, it wasn't meant to be. This alternate version of Vision comes to us from 616 and is actually more an alternate version inspired by the original, but not specifically an alternate version of the main Vision from 616. This alternate Vision is his own person and was created by Iron Lad. He is the brainwaves of Iron Lad and is like the combination basically of Iron Lad and Vision. And it was actually after some soul-searching travels that he decided to name himself Jonas, realizing he himself was neither Iron Lad or Vision, but his own person. Jonas was a member of the Young Avengers and was killed during a confrontation with Dr. Doom and Iron Lad, while fellow teammate and his love interest Cassie Lang, aka Stature, has been returned to life after also dying in that battle. Jonas still remains dead. Sad. Is it also dark that, like, no one has brought him back yet? 2 Visions, or rather 2 attempts. That is to say that when Vision is brought back for the first time in the comics after being dismantled, he doesn't actually come back as the White Vision we saw in WandaVision. The first time Vision is brought back by Hank Pym and Wonder Man, aka Simon Williams, something goes wrong, and he kind of has more of like a boiled down Terminator look going on. Like just Terminator skeleton look with like a little bit of flesh. Vision ends up going berserk and actually attacks Wanda when she tries to reach out to him and connect. His emotions are gone and he's kind of a homicidal maniac. Fortunately, Hank and Wonder Man, with a little bit of help from Hawkeye, managed to get Vision back under control, knocking him unconscious so they could try again. But they also then realized that his personality had basically been wiped clean, which is why he was so defensive when he was brought back to life and reassembled by Hank. So they gotta rework some of that programming a bit. Number 6, No One to Help! This point has some more specific spoilers for the latest episode of WandaVision, episode 6. So if you haven't gotten there yet, you maybe want to skip this one if you want to avoid spoilers, or if you haven't seen it but you're like, I'm living through the spoilers, man, which is fine. In the latest episode of WandaVision, it's Halloween in Westview as we proceed along our sitcom timeline into the world of basically kind of a Malcolm in the Middle inspired era, which aired actually in the 2000s, despite this episode having a very 90s feel, and despite that series having a 90s feel. Trying to solve the mystery of what's really going on in Westview, Vision lies to Wanda about not being able to join her and the kids trick-or-treating, due to being on duty for Neighborhood Watch. Now, in reality, he actually spends the evening investigating Westview and eventually finds the town's reality warping barrier, which he attempts to cross, not knowing that this will likely end up killing him. As outside of this altered reality, which it's hinted at is numbered as 2800 in the MCU, despite the fact that I think that number's already taken in the comics, Vision is in fact dead. When he moves to leave the town, we watch as he struggles against the magical barrier, which obviously very much wants to keep him within town limits. Sword watches as he attempts to move into their world, seeing him fall to pieces, slowly dissolving in front of them. And as a handcuffed Darcy Lewis shouts for them to do something, like help this man. But that doesn't end up happening. They just run. In the end, it's up to Wanda to save the day when Billy alerts her that he senses that his dad is in danger. Wiccan to the rescue. Number 5, White Vision. This version of Vision also comes to us from Earth 616, and while he is still the Vision, it is important to note that the Vision is a character who, within his own history, not even including alternate Earths, has had many versions of himself. Why? Well, because he's a machine who is constantly being destroyed and rebuilt in the comics. Who is the iconic White Vision? Well, White Vision is the version most of us comic book readers see and then think of his time on the West Coast Avengers, which is kind of when this all came about. This version of Vision had basically none of the same memories or emotions as the previous incarnation of himself. He came about after Immortus had kidnapped Vision, took him apart, and then put him back together again, causing a dramatic amount of damage to the Synthezoid. Number 4, Anti-Vision, which is basically just another name for Evil Vision, right? Anytime an anti-version of someone shows up, especially in this case where they are a hero usually, you should be wary of them. And yes, such was the case with this alternate version of Vision. This Vision from an alternate reality was allied with an alternate evil version of Dane Whitman, who was actually from a different reality and was known as Proctor. For those not familiar with Dane Whitman in the main continuity, he is known as the hero Black Knight. Anti-Vision was in league with Proctor, working to help him eliminate all versions of Cersei across timelines and alternate realities. Not Cersei like Game of Thrones Cersei. In the Marvel universe, Cersei is actually a hero and member of the Eternals. Usually, if you are involved in an assassination plot, by the way, especially if someone who is typically allied with a group of heroes, you're considered evil. Yeah. Number 3, all new, all white Vision. If you were wondering why Vision lost his bright color palette, in the comics it's explained as happening as a result of his biosynthetic skin being removed. It was basically badly damaged during the dismantling process when it was ripped off of him. And that damage meant that now Vision's colors, like his personality, would be much less vibrant. I like to think of this as in stories when people get like super shocked and then their hair turns white. And I think that can also happen in life too, if you experience a ton of shock. Many people have also seen the change in his coloring as symbolism for what was going on for the character in terms of his personal development. Vision would be without his emotional attachment to the information that he had. His programming wiped clean and kind of left him a blank slate, which Hank did his best to rebuild. While Vision had returned, the change in color indicated that he wasn't the same Vision, and implied that he actually may never be who he was again, as he started fresh and started anew. We're gonna see him become someone different this time around, potentially. Number 2, Robert Mitchell. This alternate version of Vision comes to us from the alternate universe of Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. There are actually a few different versions of Vision in that alternate universe, but for the purpose of our list, we're actually gonna be talking about this version of Vision, Robert Mitchell. Robert Mitchell was apprehended by S.H.I.E.L.D. after they found him making powerful bombs. Nick Fury, thinking he could be of use, decided to put him on his West Coast Ultimates team, and Robert was mutated so that he would get powers. His hero codename would become Vision. However, the West Coast Ultimates proved to be too dangerous a team, and so they ended up being pulled from the field and put in stasis tubes. Later on, Vision was used by a California spokesperson trying to get California to basically break away from the USA and sort of become its own nation. His plan was to have Vision reprogram a satellite to fall on California, making it look as though Captain America and the United States government had attacked the state. Number 1, Marvel Zombies. Vision's story in the Marvel Zombies universe appears to be a bit conflicting, depending on what you've read. We know he was at the Avengers Mansion when Ashley Williams first shows up, and later on he appears to either have been zombified, reprogrammed to assist the zombie horde, or kidnapped and used by the zombie horde for his parts and capabilities as a synthezoid. He also at one point was recruited by Nick Fury as part of the Resistance to fight against the zombie plague in what Fury believed was a full-on apocalypse scenario. Boy, was Nick Fury right. Either way you look at it though, Vision's life inevitably ends up pretty dark here, with the one event where he is being used as a technological tool being one of the most dark scenarios. Plugged in and appearing to be somewhat disassembled, Vision is no longer able to move at that point. It's zombie Scarlet Witch's job to get Vision to do what she wants, using his love for her as motivation. Here, it's not human flesh he craves, but kisses. He just wants those zombie kisses. Poor Vision. Scarlet Witch, give him like at least a little zombie kiss. Come on. He's helping you out. I just love how Wanda's like, no, I have a headache. Although to be fair, I imagine if you were a zombie and you hadn't eaten in a while, you probably would have a really bad headache, so it's also a legitimate excuse. Number 10, Stan Lee's ire. Initially, Vision wasn't loved by all at Marvel's offices. In fact, Marvel legend Stan Lee hated the look and the name of the character apparently when he was first created in 1968 by John Buscema and Roy Thomas. Apparently, Stan complained to Roy about the choice of color for the android, not liking the look of his bright red appearance, and also felt the name was not a good fit, not strong enough for the character. Today, his appearance has become iconic, and we think nothing of it. But back when he was first created, it wasn't just with comic book characters that his existence was considered controversial. Number 9, death of his first creator. Despite the fact that we often attribute Vision's existence to Ultron, he wasn't the only one involved in his creation process. And no, I'm not talking about Tony Stark here. Professor Phineas Horton was forcefully recruited by Ultron into helping him create the synthezoid we later came to know as the Vision. Vision, in fact, was originally given the memories of Professor Horton's previous android creation, which brought on the rage of Ultron, who had specifically told Horton to wipe those memories. He's like, you do it or you're dead. And Horton was like, we'll see. Ultron, of course, did kill the professor, though, creating probably one of the first tragic moments in Vision's life to come about. At the time, the synthezoid mourned the life of his creator and swore to get revenge on Ultron. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying this video and you want more like it, talking about Wanda or Vision or both of them together, romantic moments, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out on the channel. Number 8, no sense of normalcy. Despite the fact that he might seem cold and seems to embrace his synthetic nature, Vision actually constantly strives to fit in. When Wanda and Vision first got married in the comics, they both sought to find normalcy together by settling down in a suburban neighborhood. Oh, it's so nice. Similar to what we've seen the couple attempts in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Disney Plus show WandaVision. Yeah, if you like WandaVision and you want to sort of read more things that maybe have inspired it, this is a miniseries you're going to want to read. The two of them, however, it seems were never fated to have a normal life, and try as they might, strange events always seemed to disrupt their attempts and lurk around every single corner. For an example of what I'm talking about, you need not look further than the first issue of their miniseries together from the 80s, The Vision and Scarlet Witch. Seriously though, check out this miniseries. On Halloween, a quiet night in quickly turns into something out of a nightmare, ending with a visit from Scarlet Witch's often villainous then-father, Magneto. So it becomes more of a nightmare, I imagine. Number 7, MCU. Yep, the Marvel Cinematic version of Vision is not much brighter than any of the others out there. In this reality, Vision was created by Ultron just like in the comics, but instead of Vision being like his son, made to destroy the Avengers, he was meant to be a form for Ultron to actually occupy. Stealing the body of what would become Vision, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner managed to upload what remained of Tony Stark's AI, Jarvis. What was born out of that body and AI was something new. The new being took the name Vision and agreed to help the Avengers in their quest to protect humanity and defeat Ultron. Vision would later be killed by Thanos, and the way he went was pretty dark. After Princess Shuri of Wakanda failed to safely remove the Mind Stone in time, Scarlet Witch, Vision's lover, was forced to kill him in order to prevent Thanos from getting the Infinity Stone that granted Vision life. However, Thanos used the Time Stone, which he had already secured, to rewind time and bring Vision back to life so he could pull the intact Mind Stone from his head, killing him much more painfully and right in front of Wanda Maximoff. Yikes. Currently, some form of Vision appears to exist once more in WandaVision, though it was heavily implied that this was just Vision's corpse, which Wanda perhaps stole and was willing or unwillingly manipulating with her powers to make him seem alive. However, in the latest episode, we found out that's not exactly what happened, but I won't spoil it for you just yet if you haven't seen it. But yeah, even Vision's existence in WandaVision, it's all pretty dark. Number 6, From the Torch to Wonder Man. The first Human Torch was not actually Johnny Storm, but was an android created by Professor Phineas Horton himself. Ultron, wanting to make his own such creation, kidnapped the professor and forced him to build an android being for Ultron's own purposes, which we talked about a little bit earlier. The professor, of course, modeled the synthezoid after his own creation, but a little too closely for Ultron's liking, as I said, bestowing the Human Torch's memories as well to the creation we'd later come to know as Vision. Brought to life, this being attacked Ultron, who had killed the professor as punishment for his betrayal. Unfortunately, Torch Vision, this version of Vision, was no match for Ultron, and in the end he actually ended up being reprogrammed by Ultron to follow his orders and was given the brain patterns of Wonder Man. Nothing against Wonder Man, by the way, but sharing brain patterns with that hero would cause lots of weirdness for Vision and for Scarlet Witch as well later on down the line. I feel like if you get to pick who you want to share brain patterns with, Wonder Man's not at the top of the list. Also, it's really weird that like Wonder Man's brain patterns were just lying around Hank Pym's lab in like a little recorder device. It's like, why did you have those, Hank Pym? What's going on? Number 5, Wonder Man's true motivations. While Wonder Man's explanation for not lending his brain patterns to White Vision because he felt as though his own soul had been violated in the process of creating Viz the first time around was, I'm sure, true, when it came down to it, Wonder Man kind of kept himself out of the process to give himself a better shot at Scarlet Witch, who he'd always had a thing for and was madly in love with, which it's actually theorized is why former Vision was so enamored with Scarlet Witch as well. Wonder Man keeping his brain patterns to himself would of course make it almost impossible for Vision and Scarlet Witch to ever really reconcile, and eventually this would also lead to Wanda finding love and happiness with Simon, meaning that Wonder Man would in essence get what he always wanted, Scarlet Witch's love and affection. Wonder Man later on would die, and Wanda would actually bring him back in a way similar to what we saw her do with her own version of Vision, Fake Vision, in the show. Number 4, manipulated into being a villain. I really do feel for Vision. Most of the most terrible things that have happened to him in the comics or otherwise are honestly my worst nightmare, which is being controlled by other people. In this case, we're talking about when he was sent in to kill the Avengers and seemingly in some kind of murderous trance. Once the team attempted to reason with him, it became apparent that this synthezoid enemy wasn't all he appeared to be, and in fact that he might not truly be acting of his own volition. In the end, Vision would end up becoming an ally to the Avengers, fighting against his instincts to do them harm. They'd actually help him by deprogramming his murderous urges, and he would eventually go on to join the Avengers outright, fighting many times against his creator and father, Ultron. Many times. Many times. Ultron never stays dead. Number 3, Ultra Vision. This alternate version of Vision can be found in the What If series from the 90s in issue 19. Here we see what would happen if Vision ended up conquering the world. In the first story that we're offered that takes a look at this, we see actually how much better the world could be under his rule. Vision rids the globe of hunger and war and leads the Avengers in a successful battle to prevent an alien invasion. However, the B side that we are offered is a lot more dark. This alternate version of Vision is known as Ultra Vision. Actually, I think both versions are known as Ultra Vision, but the second one inspires a lot more of a hostile reaction from the world when he appears on all the world's screens and in all the computers. In an attempt to destroy the Vision, the rulers of Genosha attempt to destroy New York, where Vision's mainframe resides in the Avengers Mansion. Millions die in this attack, including almost all of the superhero community, and oddly enough, the mission actually fails to defeat Vision, who is already residing deep in the world's computers. So he still lives after it. So they basically killed a bunch of people for no reason. Number 2, Death. While those who only knew Vision from the MCU might think of his tear-jerking demise in Endgame, comic fans know that a fate worse than being destroyed, at least the first time around, awaited him in the comics. Here, instead of Wanda destroying him at his own request, urging her on with words of affirmation and love, Vision ends up being controlled against his will by her, which leads to him ending up in a direct conflict that he doesn't actually want any part of, which ultimately leads to his very gruesome death. Not only does he melt and vomit up silver pods, which transform into Ultron bots, but overkill comes into play when She-Hulk then decides to go into a rage and ends up tearing him down the middle, which is a pretty epic and permanent kind of on-panel death. Although, of course, even if you get ripped down the middle, that's probably not the end of you, because comics. Vision is still a synthetic being, and he can be recreated. So don't worry, he would be rebuilt, and he would return once more. But what a death to come back from. Number 1, weaponized. During the events of Avengers Disassembled, which led right into House of M, Wanda ended up suffering from a mental break, and as such ended up turning on her fellow Avengers. You'd think Vision, being one of the Avengers who, is married to Wanda, would be safe, but no. Wanda ended up not only getting him killed, but it was the way in which she did it, I think, that just really cut him deep. She didn't just put him in the right places to be torn apart by She-Hulk, but she actually turned him into a weapon to be used against his friends and teammates, the Avengers. Vision actually warned them when he came to them that he was no longer in control of his body before vomiting up those pods, which turned into Ultron robot drones, who then attacked the Avengers after their mansion had already been attacked. This was just a real bad day all around for the whole team. When Vision returned to life and Wanda much later came to ask for forgiveness, it would actually be this memory that would prevent him from being able to forgive his wife, Scarlet Witch. He was like, I can forgive the fact that you had a mental break, but you literally turned me against my friends and made me hurt them, and some of them died. Pretty crazy.
Halfway through into number 5, The Rival. Edward Claris is the rival, the archenemy of Golden Age Flash Jay Garrick. Claris was a chemistry professor at the university attended by Jay Garrick. He believed that he had recreated the formula that gave Garrick his speed. Bitter at the rejection of his research claims by the scientific community, though, Claris became a criminal wearing a darker version of the Flash's outfit, the original Reverse Flash. The effects of this version of the formula, however, proved to be temporary, and he was defeated when it expended. Decades later, though, following the reformation of the Justice Society of America, Claris was retrieved from the Speed Force, because he had been put in there at some point, by the interdimensional supercriminal Johnny Sorrow, who invited him to join the new Injustice Society. Now composed of pure speed energy, Claris possessed Garrick's friend and fellow Golden Age speedster Max Mercury to get the Flash's attention. Rival committed a series of swift, gruesome murders at locations that, when mapped out, would spell out a message. We don't talk about the Arrowverse version, though. I know his suit was meant to be similar to Daniel West's Reverse Flash, but come on. And for Johnny Quick. Johnny Allen, alias Johnny Quick, is a criminal speedster from Earth 3. Together with his girlfriend and partner in crime Atomica, he was a member of the crime syndicate. Johnny Allen was a high-profile criminal on the run with his equally criminal girlfriend, cornered on the roof of Central City's Star Labs. Allen was struck by a bolt of lightning which shattered the roof, and the duo fell into the lab space below, with Allen landing amid some chemicals. Obviously, this is the thing that ended up granting him his super speed, and he went on to become a super criminal alongside his girlfriend, who had also been empowered. He took on the name of Johnny Quick, while his girlfriend took on the name of Atomica. The couple joined the crime syndicate at some point after this. Johnny Quick, as he now called himself, ran through Central City answering to no one, until the day the White House burned, around the time of Darkseid's incursion onto Earth Prime. The being that had destroyed Ultraman's Krypton came to Earth, and an alliance of super criminals formed to find a way to safety. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Red Death. Red Death is a speedster that is an evil combination of Batman and the Flash, which already sounds terrifying, but wait till you hear his story. The Bruce Wayne of Earth 52 started off fighting crime with Robin, but Robins kept dying left, right, and center. So understandably, Batman got darker and darker, becoming more extreme with his, let's call them methods. Which honestly seems more realistic to me, aside from just quitting fighting crime. Which can't happen, otherwise we wouldn't have this story, right? And DC wouldn't make any money. This eventually leads him to Barry Allen, who refuses to give Bruce his Speed Force powers. So Batman, using the various rogues' weapons to fight off Barry, knocked him out. Once Barry was unconscious, Bruce tied him to the front of a cosmic treadmill-powered Batmobile and drove them both into the Speed Force. I don't even know how that happened or worked logically, but okay, you do you, Bat Marty. When entering the Speed Force, though, Barry and Bruce ended up fusing together into an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for killing, while Barry's mind was trapped in Bruce's body. He then gets a visit from the Batman Who Laughs, who asks him to join the Dark Knights, whose goal is conquering the multiverse. Penultimately, into number 2, Savitar. As a fan of the Arrowverse Arrowverse, I felt like I needed to include one of the most interesting speedsters in the show. Savitar, while sharing a name with another evil speedster from the comics, is actually revealed to be a time remnant of Barry Allen in the show, being more of a future Flash than a Savitar. Honestly, he's like a combination of both. His story, though, is pretty messed up. In essence, making himself and having a classic chicken and the egg scenario. In the post-Flashpoint Arrowverse timeline, Savitar comes back from the future to kill Iris West before her and Barry get married. This causes Barry to create as many time remnants as possible, which is basically a clone of himself, in order to stop him. But Savitar kills all of them except one. The one that he spares then gets shunned by the rest of Team Flash for not being the real Barry Allen, even though he is still the real Barry. It's weird. So in an act of fury, the Time Remnant runs back in time, creating a new identity for himself as the first speedster and the god of speed known as Savitar. But the suit he wears allows him to travel at basically instantaneous speeds, which the show Flash has not been able to do at this point, even in recent seasons. And finally, and at number 1, Reverse Flash. I know what you're thinking, okay? Isn't Eobard just the Reverse Flash? Like, not actually a version of the Flash? In the main continuity, yes, but also thinking of the Flash Armageddon crossover, Barry Allen becomes the Reverse Flash, so this could be another literal evil version of the Flash. But in the Dark Multiverse Flashpoint story, Eobard also becomes the Flash, and he kind of becomes his own form of hero in a way. A dark, twisted, messed up hero, hell-bent on eradicating competing heroes in the universe, but still a form of hero, right? Technically it counts. And I mean, like, he's still scary, alright? And a version of the Flash, so this counts for this list. In a universe where Barry Allen dies while trying to get his powers back with Flashpoint Batman, aka Thomas Wayne. But once Thawne tried to stop the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman by threatening them and killing Arthur, you know there's gonna be some hell to pay. So he sets on shaping the world in his own image. This involves preventing Batman from ever becoming Batman and instead creating his own superhero team, full of versions of characters we know and love, but all with Reverse Flash logos somewhere on their suits, usually. And I have to say, preventing Batman from being created is probably the smartest thing Eobard could have done, because either way, Batman is going to lead some form of resistance against you, so good on you. This is the smartest thing that any villain has ever done in the DC universe. Halfway through, and at number 5, Black Lightning. The Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover event was probably the biggest, most influential event the Arrowverse ever had, similar to how Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics was a really big event, with characters from shows that we didn't even know were in the Arrowverse making an appearance, like Doom Patrol, Teen Titans, and even Ezra Miller's Flash. However, one of the most highly anticipated crossovers was Black Lightning, who made his appearance after being pulled to Earth 1 by Pariah when his Earth was destroyed in part 3 of the 5-part crossover. His first meeting with the heroes was an eventful one though, attacking Vibe, Frost, and the Flash at the Antimatter Cannon, demanding that he be sent home, even though there was no home to be sent home to. After some quick descriptions about what's going on from Pariah and Barry, he calms down. But before he does, he takes a few passes at the Flash, including just throwing lightning at him, which Barry just blocks with some additional lightning. So, pretty sick if you ask me. And at 4, Supergirl. Okay, this is the last of the Arrowverse stuff, I promise, okay? He fights a lot of people in the Arrowverse. The Invasion crossover was the first big crossover the Arrowverse had. They had a couple prior to this, but this was the first one where Supergirl was brought into Earth 1, and since the Legends were having their first season, they were also there as well. However, after discovering that Barry had changed the timeline and made a whole new reality that gave Diggle a son, and killed Cisco's brother, the group basically benched Barry when they were going to save the president from aliens. Yeah, bench the guy who can run at the speed of light. That's a great idea. So since Barry was staying, Oliver stayed back with him. But it's actually a good thing that they did, because the distress signal turned out to be a trap that everyone went to because, you know, they were trying to save the president. However, they turned against Oliver and Barry because they got brainwashed by Dominators. So in an attempt to get the Dominators out of the others' heads, Barry lured Supergirl to a warehouse where he got her really mad enough to break the connection. He got her mad by showing her how much faster he is and that she couldn't even lay a finger on him. I actually find it funny because it's such a childish thing, but it works so well. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Batman. Batman is always depicted as a hero who can beat anyone despite not having any powers, and I get why it's appealing to people, because we all want to feel like we can do anything even though we're not a superhero. But the thing is, this whole Batman is the best thing is a load of bull, okay? Take this single frame from the Price storyline, where Flash puts his fist not even a centimeter away from Batman's face and says, "I could hit you 100 times before you even threw one punch." And he is absolutely right. I love this line. I love Batman being put in his place. Not only that, but as Red Death, Barry was also able to beat Batman after being blasted with positive energy. God, that sounds like the show. Barry was able to take control over his body again as Red Death, since Batman was so full of hate and whatnot. Because, you know, Red Death is a combination of Bruce Wayne and Barry when they combined after entering the Speed Force, while Barry was tied to the front of a cosmic treadmill-powered Batmobile. I'm not even kidding. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. Penultimately, in at number 2, Quicksilver. During the Marvel vs. DC crossover comic event, the Flash was pitted against Quicksilver, since he's the Marvel equivalent. However, there are multiple things about these characters that separate them. For instance, Quicksilver's body is always moving quickly, and he has to actually slow himself down in order to talk to people and live like a normal person would, which is why he comes off as short-tempered and easily annoyed, because he's literally slowing down his life for you and can't wait for you to get in the fast lane. However, the Flash and subsequently other DC speedsters only run fast when accessing the Speed Force, so otherwise they're just normal people with high metabolisms. But when pitted against each other, the Flash did understandably come out on top, because while he needs to access the Speed Force to move fast, he's accessing a literal force of nature, so yeah, it makes sense. Finally, in at number 1, Superman. The Flash beat Superman in one of the most iconic moments of all time in comics. The Flash and Superman have faced off on multiple occasions, multiple of which ended in a tie or close to it. But in the panels of Flash Rebirth number 3, we got to see how that was all possible. After all, Barry is accessing a force of nature. When Barry wanted to re-enter the Speed Force after escaping, the Justice League was looking for a way to disconnect Barry from the Speed Force to save his life. But Barry manages to break free and runs off. Superman follows him though, saying that he will find a way to save him and that they can't lose another hero, and that he won't be able to re-enter the Speed Force because he will keep up with him. That they have raced before and Superman even won a couple times. But that's when Barry looks at him super smugly and says, "Those were for charity, Clark." And then boom! The man runs insanely fast and leaves Superman in his dust. I love this moment. It settled the debate once and for all. Who's faster? The Flash, by far. I love it. Best moment in all of comics, okay? Well, I mean, after the introduction of Green Arrow's son, Connor.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Sandman. William Baker entered the world of comics in 1963 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 4. He was seen as one of the main villains in Spider-Man 3, and yes, he was at one point an Avenger. Who knew? So when Flint Marko held the mantle of Sandman, he bumped into the Thing, and they had a little heart-to-heart, a little chat about life and how to use your abilities perhaps for, for good. So he started to help Spider-Man a bit here and there, and then in Avengers issue 329, Captain America announced a new Avengers team, and on that roster was the Sandman. He was one of the 7 reserve members. He of course didn't last because, well, he was a reserve member for one, and coming from the villain side already, I'm sure he had one foot out the door anyways. Shame. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button down below because those little thumbs up are great for the page and great for our studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some Avengers who became villains. Number 9, Sentry. Making his first appearance in Sentry issue 1, of course, Robert Reynolds was a struggling addict who made his way into a laboratory and discovered something called the Golden Sentry Serum. So of course he consumed it, and then he got the surprise of a lifetime when he was then given the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. That's a lot of power. That plus a homemade costume equals a brand new superhero. Robert fought alongside the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, then the New Avengers. Things changed for Robert when Norman Osborn decided to put together a little team of his own, the Dark Avengers. So Sentry was also once a Horseman of Death, serving alongside Banshee, Grim Reaper, and Daken. He even considered himself as the heir to Apocalypse at one point, so definitely not an Avenger anymore, for sure. Number 8, Namor. King Namor is of course Marvel's version of Aquaman. He's the king of the seas, and he's also not a fan of metahumans, surprisingly. He mostly would go head to head with Black Panther and Wakanda. He wasn't a fan of Wakanda. He often attacked it quite a bit. He was asked to join the Avengers back in 1963 in Avengers issue 16, but he declined. Too cool for school. We get it. All right, cool. He did join for a brief amount of time though, but when the Avengers vs. X-Men happened, he stood with the X-Men and he fought Luke Cage and the Thing. What a traitor. I mean, he's not the worst, but if you're not with the Avengers, you're clearly against them, especially after you've helped them out for a bit and then you change your mind. Come on, dude.
Number 7, Sentry. Sentry is one of, if not the most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. He was recruited by Steve Rogers to be a part of the New Avengers. Unfortunately, Sentry is not fully good. It does in fact have a little dark side of his personality called the Void. In a sense, the Void is the total opposite of Sentry, and regardless of all the good Sentry accomplishes, the Void can quickly undo that with his chaos. Norman Osborn basically manipulated and used Sentry for his own agenda and got him to join the Dark Avengers, where he helped destroy Asgard and kill Loki as the Void. Thor was quite unhappy about this and ended up killing Sentry, but no one stays dead long in the comics and he was later brought back to life.
Number 6, Sabretooth. Victor Creed made his debut in Iron Fist issue 14, and he's been known as one of Wolverine's biggest rivals. But during the Avengers X-Men Axis storyline, the Red Skull stole the brain of Charles Xavier, and he planned to wipe out all of mutant kind. And then in book 2, we see the inversion, where good goes bad and bad goes good. Interesting time, because Doctor Doom and Scarlet Witch cast a spell, so now Sabretooth was on the good side. So after the dust settled, Iron Man made it so that Sabretooth wouldn't flip back, so Sabretooth joined the Avengers Unity Division. This didn't last forever, and recently in House of X issue 6, Sabretooth faced trial among the Quiet Council, and let's just say he ended up swallowed by Krakoa below the surface, where he's trapped in a state of permanent stasis for the rest of his life. How comfortable. I mean, he kind of made it easy for them too. He clearly didn't fight for his case.
Number 5. Zombie Avengers. In Avengers Age of Ultron, published in 2015, we're introduced to a Marvel universe based off of the popular cinematic universe that features everyone's favorite heroes. In this universe, after the Chitauri invasion of New York City, a zombie shows up at Tony Stark's birthday party. The zombie is killed by Black Widow, but not before its infection is spread through touch to Thor and Black Widow. The Avengers attempt to keep the zombified heroes contained, while Tony and Bruce Banner head out in search of a cure. Thor escapes, and he goes after some of the other Avengers, and this leads into the storyline called Zombies Assemble, published in 2007, originally a manga but then later adapted into English for the Western audience.
Number 4, Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff is the twin brother of Wanda Maximoff, and in Avengers West Coast issue 57 back in 1965, he joined the team. Pietro has been trouble for the team for a long time. I mean, he convinced Wanda to do what she did in House of M, he's framed the Avengers for treason, and he has no problem using pieces of Terrigen to give his daughter Luna special abilities, even though he knows he shouldn't do that. Also, that whole thing with Layla Miller after House of M, where he saved her life just so he can be the one to take her out, believing that she was responsible for the House of M event. Yeah, it's safe to say he went from Avenger to villain. Like, those are just 3 out of many, many things. In West Coast Avengers 33, Magneto's bloodline got the best of him, and he got fellow Avengers captured by the communist gang. Fastest guy ever, but makes the most mistakes. I don't understand.
Number 3, Hulk. In the comics, at one point, Hulk came to the conclusion that the Avengers disliked him, and that really irritated the Hulk, which is something that you really don't want to do, especially to the Hulk. He ends up leaving the team and trying to work with Namor to get revenge on them. Apparently, even though Hulk and Namor were working together, they weren't going to stay loyal for long after their plan was complete. In the end, and before the battle was complete, Hulk turned into Bruce Banner and took off and disappeared.
Number 2, Captain America. There are a couple lines from Steve Rogers that fans will remember that took place in the MCU, like Avengers Assemble, that is America's ass, but the line Hail Hydra was followed by a roar of applause on opening night of Endgame. Why? Because not only does he use his post-Avengers knowledge to obtain the scepter, which in that of itself is already pretty sweet, but because the audience expects another cool elevator fight and Steve outsmarts us. But the line Hail Hydra comes right from the comics, and a bit of a darker scenario. The last words of Captain America Steve Rogers were that of Hail Hydra, and fans were not happy. This was huge news. People were pretty upset. Readers were sending in death threats. Like, could you imagine? The 2017 series Secret Empire concluded that bad Captain America was a double, and that the good guy was locked in the cosmic cube. Okay, solid save, but those images of evil Steve will live in our heads rent-free, so thank you for that. And finally, number 1, Scarlet Witch. Of course, I'm saving her for last, of course. She's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Pietro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did of course join the Avengers as well. She's one of the biggest Marvel characters ever, and during the events of M-Day, she spoke those 3 words, "No more mutants," and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or wiped out. That large number being 986,618, only leaving a couple hundred left. That's crazy. That's like Thanos level destruction almost. And then in the MCU as well, we just watched Wanda become a villain over a 9-week period. She had a mental breakdown similar to M-Day, and she trapped Westview in her hex. Now, of course, she frees everybody and things look pretty back to normal, kind of, by the end of the show. But with that after credit scene of her studying the Darkhold, and with the given knowledge that Wanda is in the next Doctor Strange movie, she's for sure going to become a villain. Even for a little bit, she'll be a villain, for sure. I can't wait to see what else she does. She looked like she was studying up pretty fast while she was sipping tea on her doorstep, so I don't know. Her mind's crazy. She can do anything she wants.
Number 10, Bearded Avengers? In Marvel's what? Huh? We enter an alternate universe where every member of the Avengers has a beard, including the female members. Some of these beards are inexplicable, appearing to grow on Spider-Man's mask or on the Thing's rocky jawline. Honestly though, Captain America and the Hulk rock the look pretty well. This version of the Avengers is more bizarre than dark, but we felt they were definitely worth a mention. Number 9, Dead Avengers. In Deadpool Killustrated from 2013, the Merc with the Mouth comes to the realization that he and all these other costume crusaders are trapped in a repeating cycle of death and rebirth because they're all fictional characters. The only solution? Kill everyone. This issue is a sequel to Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, and you can probably imagine where I'm going with this. Deadpool travels to the Ideaverse to kill certain characters and prevent spin-offs from ever being made, facing off against some classic literature characters like Moby Dick and Sherlock Holmes. At one point in the story, there's a flashback where we see the Avengers, but only appearing as corpses. Number 8, Captain America Corps. If you can't get enough Cap, this is definitely the storyline for you. This series, published in 2011, showcases an all-star lineup of Captain America variants. Branded enemies of the state, these heroes sport classic red, white, and blue and take on the America Man in a story that is as all-American as baseball and homemade apple pie.
Number 7. The Incredible Hulk. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because, well, the comics, that story didn't end up going so well, obviously. Because on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left the Hulk a little heartbroken, to say the least. So he rolls his shoulders back a few times, and then he heads back to Earth, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just destroys everybody. It's so scary. I mean, all the heroes that Earth has come to love just in the path of this death train. Like, he locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and then makes them fight to the death. It's like Madison Square Up Garden. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, I guess it becomes second nature. I don't know. The whole story is a bloody good mess. It's great seeing the panic on the Avengers' faces the entire time because they know that they're screwed, and that's what makes it real and scary.
Number 6, Avengers Initiative. In Uncanny Avengers Ultron Forever from 2015, we see Black Widow form the Avengers Initiative after Zero Day, during which Thanos invaded and killed about half of Earth's heroes. The heroes who remained make up this gritty version of the Avengers, including a version of Thor that wields a giant axe. This version of the Avengers goes on to kill Thanos using combined magic and science to finish him once and for all.
Number 5, Iron Man. Yes, there was even a point during the comics where Tony betrayed the Avengers. Well, sort of, anyways. During the crossing, Tony's brain gets corrupted by Kang the Conqueror. He was trying to control him by making him go crazy. Kang even gets him to frame Hawkeye. Once the Avengers find out, they go back in time to find a younger Tony to help them stop the older Tony. Now, this story was a bit confusing, with some even believing that Tony wasn't as mind-controlled as we all believed he was, since in the end, he didn't even seem surprised by anything he found out that he did while working for Kang.
Number 4, Defunct Avengers. Next Avengers, Heroes of Tomorrow, came out in 2008, and in it, everything starts out great. Our heroes have defeated all of their foes, and they all have normal lives, starting families and having children. But when Ultron shows up, our heroes race to hide and protect their children, which they succeed at, but then end up dying themselves. Except for Thor, who returns to rule Asgard after his father's death. It's a long road as Iron Man and Vision work together to seek out the children of the Avengers and raise a new generation of Avengers eventually defeating Ultron with some help from the Incredible Hulk.
Number 3, the Vision. Making his glorious debut in Avengers issue 57, the Vision is a synthezoid, and in the comics he was created by Ultron using parts of the original Human Torch and the mind of Wonder Man. Just bam, smack together. He turned on his original creator, Phineas Horton, and he joined the Avengers. Nice. And then in the MCU, he's created as Ultron's new body, but with the addition of the Mind Stone and a little bit of Jarvis, we have an android Avenger. Also nice. But during the Secret Empire storyline, Vision was part of Hydra's Avengers when they were taking over the world, all from an AI virus. Gotta get that firewall installed, my friend. Arnim Zola was the one to blame for that. So who knows, maybe now with the White Vision being free in the MCU and pretty much reborn, his firewall probably isn't the best either. Also, it's confusing because it appears that Vision gets all of his memories back, but then he flies away and then he's not to be seen for the rest of the show. So clearly something's up here. I'm betting the MCU does him dirty. Maybe they reprogram him to make him evil or something. Or he might become Ultron. That was a big theory for WandaVision. We'll see. We'll see.
Number 2, Tyrant Avengers. This version of the Avengers appeared in Avengers Volume 5 in 2014. Their reality was destroyed and they were brought to the Marvel Prime universe by Advanced Idea Mechanics. They escape from AIM Island and arrive in New York, realizing that they're actually in an alternate universe. Thor notices some humans nearby not on their knees as they should be and decides to kill them and teach them a lesson. Eventually, these guys end up squaring off against the real Avengers in an epic showdown. In the end, AIM stealthily captures both teams and these bad guys get sent off to their own world, Earth 83292. Maybe we'll check in with them in a future Marvel story. And now, number 1, Revengers. In Realm of Kings number 1, released in 2009, we meet the Revengers, Avengers of the Cancerverse, corrupted by Lord Mar-Vell. The Cancerverse is a reality where life defeated death, resulting in eternal life. But not the good kind. The entire universe is a living corpse kind. In this story, a Terrigen bomb is launched by the Inhumans of Earth 616 and creates an opening between Earth and the Cancerverse. Lord Mar-Vell leads an invasion hoping to expand the Cancerverse. The Revengers are super dark and scary, and most notably we see Bruce Banner sporting some huge horns, Carol Danvers with a creepy third eye, and Captain America with stars that look suspiciously like pentagrams. You would be hard-pressed to find a darker version of Earth's mightiest heroes.
Number 10, Hawkeye. In the MCU's Avengers in 2012, Hawkeye betrayed the Avengers by being brainwashed by Loki. Loki knew that having Hawkeye with him was valuable, and he could access many of the secrets that S.H.I.E.L.D. was hiding. Hawkeye launched an attack on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier that the Avengers so happened to be on so he could free Loki. He takes out one of the propeller systems on the helicarrier and invades it with his team. Hawkeye and Black Widow fight, with her hoping to free him from the spell. In the end, he's able to fight the spell because Black Widow hit him really hard in the head and was able to gain back control of his own mind. Number 9, Hank Pym. In the Avengers issue 213, Hank Pym received a court-martial for how he handled the situation in a fight with the Avengers. He definitely was not in a good place at the time and was a complete wreck. He still wanted to be a part of the Avengers team and wasn't ready to be forced off of it. He decided to design a robot that would attack him during the trial. The catch was that since he designed it, he knew how to easily defeat it. His wife, the Wasp, was completely against Hank doing this, but he didn't care. He told her to keep it a secret, and in the end, the Avengers did find out about the truth about Hank's plan and took him off the team. Number 8, Moondragon. In the comics, Moondragon has very strong mind control abilities, like telepathy and telekinesis. So when she stumbles upon a planet with the people of that planet ready for war, she wants to help them. She doesn't want these people to suffer over what will eventually happen if the war is to start, death. So she decides to control the entire race of people on this planet with her mind control powers to stop fighting. But she didn't just stop there. She went even further and made sure that the people of this planet would even worship her. She even wants to continue to do this throughout the universe. The Avengers find out, she brainwashes Thor to fight them, and she's later defeated and gets a device from Odin that dampens her powers to stop her from doing this ever again.
Number 7, Avengers Unity Division. In Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe Again, published in 2017, we meet Avengers Unity Squad. Consisting of Rogue, Quicksilver, Deadpool, and others, they head to AIM Island, headquarters of Advanced Idea Mechanics, while investigating the killings of several superheroes. They arrive in search of MODOK Superior, believing he has the intel that they need. Deadpool advances during the fight to finish him off, but before he does, MODOK speaks some code words and triggers programming in Deadpool's brain that causes him to see his teammates as fun, colorful enemies. And then he kills them all. Another very dark, very dead version of the Avengers.
Number 6. Scarlet Witch. In Avengers Disassembled, Scarlet Witch goes crazy, all due to the fact that she really just wanted to have children who were real. But since she was with someone who was artificial, that wasn't really possible. But that didn't stop her from creating them. She used her powers to create the children that she always wanted to have. But what drove her mad was the fact that the children weren't technically real, and she couldn't stop thinking about that. She then basically uses her powers to tear the Avengers apart by making their lives complete hell, basically killing Hawkeye, Tony costing the Avengers a deal with the UN because he was drunk while speaking, and Vision getting split in half by She-Hulk.
Number 5, Hawkeye. In the MCU, Hawkeye's had it pretty rough. I mean, by the time Avengers Endgame rolled out, Clint had lost his entire family, and then 5 years after Thanos snapped his fingers, we catch up with him in Tokyo, and he's not the same guy that we once knew. Now he's taken heads and he's taken names. We get our first look at Ronan. Now, I know that Natasha meets up with him and they have a beautiful moment, and then he rejoins the team. He even volunteers to test the time travel tech himself. But if we look back at Avengers 1, Hawkeye is a villain for like most of that movie. He turns evil before the opening title even pops up on screen. He's the guy who took down the helicarrier. He almost killed everybody on that boat. Now, I know Loki had a scepter and that caused it, so if we look at Avengers 1 and Avengers Endgame, I think it's safe to meet in the middle and say that the MCU Hawkeye has been somewhat of a Avenger who turned into a villain, at least for a bit.
Number 4. Namor. During the Avengers vs. X-Men series, Namor left the Avengers and went on the side of the X-Men. Now, to be clear, the X-Men were only trying to apprehend the Avengers, but Namor planned something much more evil. And by evil, I mean he found out that the Avengers were in Wakanda and thought that was the perfect plan to take them out would be to drown them with a huge-ass wave. It didn't end up working for Namor, and instead only enraged the Wakandans wanting revenge for what he did. From there, Namor and Wakanda became rivals. This rivalry is something that fans have wanted to see be a part of the MCU since the introduction of Wakanda in Black Panther in 2018.
Number 3, Hulkvengers. In Longshot Saves the Marvel Universe, we see some crazy variations of Marvel characters. This series, published in 2014, features a team known as the Hulkvengers, made up of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, and Hawkeye. It's worth noting that these guys are antagonists in the story, along with Wilson Fisk wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, Vampire King Wolverine, and a Venom version of the Punisher. We also see Otto Octavius trapped in Spider-Man's body, and a version of Kraven the Hunter hosting the Phoenix Force. It's a dark and twisted take on everyone, and you can tell that the creators had a lot of fun making it. Did I mention there's a werewolf Captain America?
Number 2, Black Widow. So in the comics, Black Widow has turned on the Avengers at one point. Now, in her defense, she was being blackmailed by Weeping Lion with the goal to go rogue and turn on S.H.I.E.L.D. During this time, she allowed herself to be brought back to the Avengers Tower by Tony Stark. She only let him take her back there to gain access to his equipment. So she knocked him out and took what she needed. Also, during the MCU Civil War, she also turned on Tony Stark and ended up jumping ship and siding with Captain America. Number 1, Captain America. This was a huge shocker at one point in the comic and was a jaw-dropping moment when fans were reading it. The reveal that Captain America was really a Hydra agent all along sent shockwaves through the fan base. How could the Star-Spangled Man be evil? He has always proven to do anything he had to protect his family, team, and his country. It turns out that the Cosmic Cube had altered Steve Rogers' history in a major way, making him this Hydra agent and betraying everything he stood for. It led Rogers to take over America with Zemo, all in the name of Hydra. Desperate to stop this, Ant-Man and the Winter Soldier went into the Pocket Dimension to find Steve Rogers' consciousness. They were able to use the Cobra to save Steve Rogers' true form. Evil Steve Rogers fought good Steve Rogers in the end, and good prevailed, and evil Steve Rogers was defeated by good Steve Rogers wielding Mjolnir in an epic battle.
Number 10, Peter Parker. Hey, we didn't say which Spider-Man was doing the embarrassing here. Peter Parker and Miles Morales met for the first time when Peter was teleported to Miles' universe. Now, I don't know why Peter's first decision was to attack Mr. Morales. He's had clones of himself before, and he's also been to other alternate universes, but hey, that's what he did. and it was 110% a mistake. As fans of Miles know, he is extremely capable. And he also has a unique Spider-Man power set. He used his Venom sting to paralyze Peter while jumping over him. He then went invisible and got Peter with a sneak attack kick to the face. It doesn't stop there though. After Peter demasked Miles, he got a nice electric shock that knocked him out cold. For an 11-year-old kid, Miles gave the experienced Peter Parker quite the beating. Number 9. Winter Soldier and Falcon. For a young lad, Peter Parker seems to overpower a lot of people. In his introduction to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Peter just shows us, and 2 of Captain America's best pals, that he ain't someone to mess with. During their fight, he overpowered the super soldier, even using his metal arms against him, disables and webs up Falcon, and redirects a huge chunk of metal flung at him by the Winter Soldier, all while quipping in the best ways possible. It was honestly so awesome to see when it first happened. He leaves them laying on the ground exhausted and webbed up. Not only an embarrassment for the 2 veteran soldiers and heroes, but a really fitting and hilarious introduction for the character to the MCU. Number 8. Luke Cage. A lot of the time, when a new hero is introduced into a comic book world, a fight between the misunderstood hero and another has to take place. That is exactly what happened when Luke Cage came on the scene. Luke Cage, the hero for hire, showed up in the Amazing Spider-Man number 123, hired by J. Jonah Jameson to capture Spider-Man for the death of Norman Osborn. Luke Cage ain't a guy you should underestimate by any means. Super strength and stamina, bulletproof skin, and a healing factor. But it's Spider-Man. Luke tackles Spider-Man off a roof and gets a few punches in. But Spider-Man kicked him off of another roof, teased him about basically being a mercenary, slammed him through a brick wall, got several fists to the face in, used Luke's own weight against him, and punched him through a skylight. They come to blows later on in the comic with pretty much the same outcome, causing Luke Cage to quit this one particular job. Go web! Fly! Up away web! Shazam! Go web go! 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 Go web go! Oh wait, that's not my power. No, my power is to make YouTube videos for you guys. Do you know what gives me this power? You liking and subscribing to the channel. And you are doing an absolutely stunning job. Keep it up. And don't forget to check out our Facebook for more content. Number 7. The Hulk. In terms of raw power, Spider-Man stands absolutely no chance against the Hulk. I think his spider sense may give him some kind of advantage, but there is no way he is lasting long in that fight. Unless he gets a power boost in the form of, I don't know, the Power Cosmic. Oh, that's exactly what happened in the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 328. The Grey Hulk, who yes is a bit weaker and logical compared to his Savage counterpart, is hired by Sebastian Shaw to target Spider-Man. Money's always a good motivator. Unfortunately for Hulk, Spider-Man has been going to the Cosmic Gym and hitting the cosmic weights. He lands some pretty heavy blows on the Grey Goliath and even blinds him with a new I-beam power. When some kids are put in danger though, Spider-Man ends the conflict quick by punching the Hulk into orbit and then saving him before he suffocates, standing all confident with his hands on his hips and like that. Number 6. The Fantastic Four. In the very first issue of his self-titled magazine, Spider-Man is putting other heroes to shame. Spider-Man infiltrates the Baxter Building, where he is encased in a plexiglass cage that he very easily opens the door to. He takes a single punch from the thing before he throws him into Johnny Storm. When Reed tries to catch Peter, he totally just dodges it and webs up Mr. Fantastic's hands. He uses his spider sense to detect Sue Storm while she's invisible and spins her around really fast with her lasso. But then, Johnny Storm gets him in a circle of flame. He says, and I quote, "Well, I'll just jump over that clown's little trap." It's honestly a pretty impressive display, and it happened in no less than 1.5 pages. The fight ends when Spider-Man lets him know that he's here to join up, and with that little fight was just a display of what he can do. Yeah, that little display would probably do better than a resume. Number 5. Iron Man. In the Civil War storyline, we know that Spider-Man initially is on the side of Tony Stark's Iron Man, but after he sees the lengths that Tony is willing to go to, he has a bit of a change of heart. Obviously, this leads to a scuffle between the two. At this time, Tony had given Peter the Iron Spider suit. What he didn't tell Peter is that he built in an emergency override that would shut down the suit and essentially shut down Peter with the simple phrase Omega Omega Epsilon 9. It's only a bit of a jerk move. You took Peter under your wing, but you're going to plant a failsafe against him? It kind of makes it look like you know you're guilty. But then again, he is a genius, he is a member of the Illuminati, and he is not the kind of guy to take risks. But how is this embarrassing for Tony? Well, I'm glad you asked, my little nerds. Peter is no idiot, and behind Stark's back, he hacked into the suit and built in his own override to override the override that Tony put there. Passcode, surprise. And the suit is back up and running and covers Tony's helmet in a thick layer of web, allowing Peter to get in a good punch and escape. Number 4, Wolverine. This one's a pretty quick one. I bet some of you thought I was gonna pull from the Wolverine vs. Spider-Man comic. I'll do you one better. It should be obvious, but you don't dare insult Mary Jane Watson to Peter's face. In Amazing Spider-Man issue 522, Peter is awoken with a call about a newspaper article claiming Mary Jane has a little entanglement with Tony Stark. It's obviously not true and actually a setup by a villain. But that's not the point right now. Peter got out of his bed in Stark Tower and goes looking for his wife. Along the way, he runs into Wolverine in a room with a very lovely high-up view of the city. Now, Logan decides to start going on about how Mary Jane messed up big time, and after a warning from Peter, he decides to comment on her lack of brains. This lovely little comment gets him thrown through an unbreakable glass window, and it gives him a really colorful way to catch a cab. Number 3. Daredevil. When Spider-Man was in possession of the symbiote suit, he wasn't his normal self. He was much more ruthless. And Spider-Man can already knock criminals into a coma when he is pulling his punches. When Spider-Man interrupts Sin Eater Stanley Carter from attacking Betty Brant and almost killing her, he starts to lay into the guy, beating Stanley while giving him an earful. Peter goes so far that Daredevil notices his heartbeat pounding and pulls him off of the beaten villain. He defends the criminal from Peter, who is seemingly gonna kill him. If you want him, you'll have to come through me. Probably not the best choice of words there, Daredevil. The very next panel shows Daredevil flying through a window. If it wasn't such a serious moment, I would laugh. Nah, I did laugh. Is that wrong? I can't help it, I'm sorry. Number 2, the X-Men. It seems that Spider-Man really shows his skill when he comes into contact with teams of heroes. First the Fantastic Four, and in the 4th issue of Secret Wars, the X-Men. As if dealing with multiple superpowered beings was his speciality or something. I think the best part about these altercations is the way he just keeps talking while he's embarrassing them. After Xavier senses Spider-Man listening in on their conversation, Spider-Man attacks the X-Men a little prematurely, I'll admit. He dodges Wolverine, webs Colossus' face, dangles Rogue from a rod, webs up Nightcrawler faster than he can say BAMF, and swats Wolverine away with a single swing and escapes. It's just so crazy to me how he knows that he easily outclasses almost every one of the X-Men. Or if not, he knows exactly how to subdue them. Number 1. Superboy. If we're doing a video about characters embarrassing other heroes, there is almost always going to be one point that has to do with the DC and Marvel crossover event. Just like the first point, this isn't actually Peter Parker though, but it's a clone of him, so that's basically the same thing. When the DC Marvel crossover happened, Ben Reilly had taken up the Spider-Man mantle. And it was him that fought Superboy on a rooftop. To get things going, Spider-Man hits the Superboy with a webbing right to his very stylish sunglasses. Superboy, just trying to get a hit on our Spider friend, busts a hole into a water tower, drenching the entire battlefield. Spider-Man wouldn't stand too long in a one-on-one slugging match with this guy. But that's not his specialty anyways. Just as Superboy is about to land a flying blow into Spidey, he jumps out of the way, firing webbing all over the guy and leaving the soaking wet Superboy to fly straight into an electrical box, taking him right out of the fight.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Diana gets ahead of the game. One of the changes to reality that occurs during the Flashpoint event is when Wonder Woman and Aquaman get married. I mean, it's great. I mean, well, not really. I mean, weddings are fun, I guess. I don't know. I hear shout and then I black out. It's so weird how that works. So this is the reality now where Bruce Wayne was shot and not his parents. And if that wasn't wild enough, Superman is now in a government lab having a not so relaxing time. And then we see Diana being saved by a sea monster from Aquaman. How lovely. nice thing. This is great. We have nice things in this list already. Lovely. Ah, yes, classic Wonder Woman. Nice. Nothing like getting cheated on and then having your head cut off. Adding injury to insult this time. And then she pops her crown off of her severed head and then places it nicely on her own head. A war, of course, follows between the Atlanteans and the Amazons, but it comes to a lovely conclusion when Wonder Woman stabs Aquaman in the back. And yes, I mean literally in a sense. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a like, that would be great. You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's pop right back into number 9 right off the bat. Let's keep going. Number 9, hard feelings. This next one isn't exactly a bad deed, but it's too weird of a Justice League story to not include, so I'm gonna throw it in at number 9. One I'd rather not have in my brain all day, so let's just get it out of the way. So now we go to World's Finest Comics issue 289. So Batman and Superman decide to catch up on some bro time, you know, take a break from beating up bad guys, just have a heart-to-heart, see what's going on in here. Now this heart-to-heart is the start of a wild adventure. Now the issue is titled The Krill Way of Dying, and the dialogue itself is really good stuff, actually. It highlights the mental health struggles that superheroes go through, you know, not being able to save everybody. It's meaningful, it's powerful dialogue, but what takes this issue to new heights, well, rather new lows, is when Superman and Batman are interrupted by a meteorite crashing, and out of the meteorite emerges the Crew. Now the Crew, not what you imagine in your head off the bat. I can tell you that because the Crew, they're a bunch of space worms, and they're attracted to sadness. That's how they found the two, because they were talking about super sad stuff, and they're like, yes, sad, this way, let's go, let's head it. Their super depression was literally glowing. So these aliens need emotion in order to pass away. See what happens when you try and feel nice things, Justice League? Way to go, now we're all crying. I'm definitely crying. They're dead. Space worms are coming for me because I'm crying now. What a vicious circle. Number 8, Lockdown Beatdown. Kingdom Come is a 4-issue miniseries that comes from Mark Waid and Alex Ross. It's an Elseworlds imprint. Now, in this alternate reality, 20 years into the future, our heroes have gotten a little older, so they settled into the retirement life. Now, these new anti-heroes stepped up, and new vigilantes, of course, soon followed. Some of them were children of the previous superheroes, so it goes kind of deep. See, Parasite breaks open a hero named Captain Atom, and you already know by his name how that's gonna turn out if something like that were to explode. Boom, there goes Kansas, gone. No, literally Kansas was gone. It was now just this wasteland. So this is when the Justice League comes in to save the day, or I guess turn the wasteland into a super prison too. That as well. So when you throw supervillains and superheroes into this alien tech super prison, there's gonna be a few fistfights, that's for sure.
Number 7, the Crime Society. Hailing from Earth 3 comes the Crime Society of America, but not to be confused with the Crime Syndicate of America, who we may or may talk about later on. Consisting of Johnny Quick II, Owlman II, Power Ring, Superwoman, Ultraman, and a few others, this team of villains is basically just evil doppelgangers of the Justice League and the Justice Society. The Crime Society encountered and fought the Challengers, consisting of Donna Troy, Jason Todd, Kyle Rayner, and Bob the Monitor, and the Jokester. After the Challengers and the Jokester escaped to another universe, the Crime Society were offered a place among Monarch's transdimensional army, which they accepted, of course. The Crime Society went on to fight on Earth 51 and battle the Monitors. When Superboy Prime subsequently caused the destruction of Earth 51's reality, it's unknown if any of the Crime Society were able to actually survive that. Now, while we're waiting to hear their fate, why not check out their story for yourself, starting with 2007's 52, number 52.
Number 6, Batman ignores Blue Beetle. So back in Countdown to Infinite Crisis, Blue Beetle had actually approached his super friends and teammates after he had discovered something called the OMAC Project. So he brought it to Batman's attention, but Bruce just doesn't really give a damn at this point. He brushes him off almost immediately. Well, the OMAC Project, of course, turned out to be something, and when Blue Beetle discovered it, he's all by himself, and he doesn't live to tell the tale. If only Batman just took him seriously in this moment, things would have turned out a lot less ugly for him. I mean, I know Batman created this thing in the first place, so it's kind of fair that he didn't listen to him, but like before Infinite Crisis, the OMACs killed a lot of people. Shouldn't have just given him like 2 minutes to maybe explain. And the fact that Batman didn't just listen to his team member, especially when he already knew something was kind of going on, sounds like it's all on you, Batman. I don't want to be the guy to say it, but I was just the guy to say it.
Halfway through into number 5, Wonder Woman destroying the Justice League. When it comes to power and skill levels, Wonder Woman is arguably one of the strongest members of the Justice League. Characters like Superman and Martian Manhunter may have incredible power as aliens, and Superman, especially, may well just be the most powerful hero of all, but Wonder Woman is also basically a deity, at least being a god adjacent, because, you know, she's an Amazon. She's one of DC's most powerful heroes, if not their most powerful hero, especially if Kryptonite's around. And she has to keep her abilities and powers in check, much like how Spider-Man always has to pull his punches so he doesn't kill someone. However, in a one-shot called JLA A League of One, written by Christopher Moeller, Wonder Woman realizes that the Justice League are just holding her back. She realizes that the entire league will be destroyed if she doesn't stop them herself, so she takes on each member of the Justice League and takes them down on her own so that she can act individually, kinda like a mini version of Marvel's Civil War, but on a much smaller and less daunting scale. Though understandable, this is still an initial betrayal and a major hurt. Luckily for Wonder Woman, her team does forgive her, because, you know, she didn't actually kill them. Maybe she was just having a midlife crisis, we don't know.
Number 4, get a room. Look guys, superheroes have emotions just like us, okay? They meet other superheroes and they take down bad guys together. They hook up in the sky in the owl ship above the rest of the world. They're just like us, okay? Sometimes key intimate moments are hard to conceal when you have the powers of a god, right? Specifically Wonder Woman and Superman. So after the triumph that is The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller decided to dive into an intimate moment with those two. So Wonder Woman and Superman embrace in each other, but where does this happen? In a fancy hotel? Fortress of Solitude? No and no. They get it on up there in the sky, of course, where everyone can see and hear. So they're superheroes, so this caused massive tidal waves. Volcanoes are blasting off, people are even evacuating islands. Like, this is a bad day. I mean, bad day for everybody but Superman and Wonder Woman. They look like they had a great time.
Number 3, Injustice Justice League. Now I think everyone can agree that no other timeline has featured more DC character deaths than the Injustice timeline. After the Joker takes virtually everything from Superman, the Man of Steel finally cracks and just kills the Clown Prince of Crime. From there, heroes continue to devolve into their worst selves, with a fair split maintaining their moral codes and principles. In the video game and comic franchise Injustice Gods Among Us, the Justice League still calls themselves by that same name, eventually changing it to the Regime though. But that's about the only similarity between the two universes, because the Injustice universe is about as dark as it can get. Superman loses his cool and just thrusts his hand through the Clown's chest after the Joker destroys Metropolis, killing Lois Lane. As you might imagine, this not only kills the Joker, but surprises Batman and everyone else around him. Superman decides he is fed up with the old way of doing things and sets out to create a new world order under his totalitarian rule. Superman reforms the League after opposing Batman and many of his other former friends. In the end, it's actually the Dark Knight who succeeds in recruiting Superman from the regular DC universe, who comes in to defeat his darker alter self. Now if you're not familiar with this storyline, check it out for yourself, starting with 2013's Injustice Gods Among Us #1, or honestly just head back and play through the games one more time.
Number 2, Superman outs Batman. So in the climax of Batman vs Superman, we see Bruce Wayne straight up try and take out the Man of Steel. It's intense, and it ends with Superman not surviving in a way, but until he comes back in the Justice League movie. Spoilers. So if you're feeling a little upset about that, this next one should turn the tables in your mind. Superman once outed Batman, and he did it in a pretty hilarious way. Through social media, of course. Did he make a TikTok? No. Was it through Ask FM? No and no. It was in the pages of Injustice Gods Among Us issue 10. I mentioned this comic earlier because it has our super friends going against each other, but Superman takes it up to the next level when he posts Batman's true identity online. His tweet was quite simple and to the point. Batman is Bruce Wayne. 1.5 million retweets, not too shabby at all. Batman's trending on Twitter in real life almost like once a week, so I'm just waiting for the day when I look and I'm like, yes, Batman is real. And he's Paul Giamatti, get out of here, I knew it. Number 1, Justice Lords. The DCAU introduced us to the Justice Lords back in November 2003 in an episode titled A Better World. Was it a better world? No, definitely not. They were a multiversal counterpart of the Justice League. This is an alternate universe now, one where Lex Luthor is the current president of the United States. The Justice Lords were assembled to protect humanity from itself, which just sounds like bad news. That sounds like a bad story in the making. So yeah, they were robot replicas of Superman, and the inmates of Arkham Asylum were brainwashed and lobotomized. Just not an ideal world at all, definitely not a better one. And then when the Justice Lords of this universe found out they weren't alone, they tried to bring their ways of heroics over to our world. But our good Justice League took them down with the help of our Lex Luthor, who used the power disruptor to neutralize their super abilities. So it's like good Lex, bad Lex, good team, bad team, mind explosion. The idea of a rogue team member is terrifying, but a rogue team? What a nightmare. How do you stop them?
In a 10, expose Batman. While this seems like something any version of Superman would do if they turned bad, it's actually interesting to see that only the Injustice version of Superman actually did it. Yes, after getting fed up of Batman leading the resistance against his totalitarian regime, because, you know, that's a bad thing, Bruce, Superman tells the whole world that Batman is really Bruce Wayne. How does he do this, you may ask? a press conference or like a world message or like a video? No, none of the above. The dude just freaking tweets. Superman, in just 4 simple words, tells the world that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Using those 4 words, actually, in that order. From the official Superman Twitter account, by the way. Dude doesn't even use his Clark Kent Twitter. Like, he's still hiding behind his identity, but he decides to out Bruce's. That's hypocrisy right there. But I guess that's all politicians. With over 2.5 million retweets and over 3.5 million favorites, this is certainly #1 on trending for sure. At least until Kim K posts a pic in like a sexy Batman costume, so that the whole Bruce is actually Batman thing moves to #2, and then the whole internet breaks again. And at 9, joining Reverse Flash. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse 1, Flashpoint, we see a world where Barry Allen died while attempting to get his speed back with Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline. This leads to Reverse Flash claiming to be the Flash and trying to end the war with the Atlanteans and Amazons by threatening them. Obviously, this doesn't work out because they're the goddamn Atlanteans and Amazons. So, in an effort to save himself, Reverse Flash races through time, changing events to create the world exactly how he wants it, which involves saving not only Bruce Wayne, but Martha and Thomas Wayne as well, resulting in a world without a Batman. Because, you know, Batman's gonna fight against Reverse Flash no matter what. So, just getting rid of Batman, this is the smartest thing any villain has ever done, straight up. But on the final page of this issue, we see Eobard with all the new heroes he ended up creating and convincing them to join him, as we can see by the Reverse Flash symbols on their suits. Even Green Lanterns and Wonder Woman has one. This page also has a Superman and honestly, sick suit, but being controlled, or I guess led by the Reverse Flash, makes this utterly horrifying to think about, especially when you can see the other members of the Flash family racing behind Reverse Flash. Like, he finally got what he wanted. Eobard became the Flash, and now he has his own Justice League that serves his own purposes. This should have been higher. And at 8, put Atlantis in the desert. Superman has his dark moments in Injustice. This especially includes Injustice Gods Among Us #12, written by Tom Taylor with art from Mike Miller and Tom Denerick. Injustice Gods Among Us 12 shows readers Aquaman unleashing Atlantean armies on coastal cities around the globe as a way to show Superman that, you know, it's not gonna happen. Atlantis will not be taken. Superman, of course, takes this as a threat, because of course he does, and you know, Batman knew this would happen. But Aquaman, being Aquaman, refuses to back down, and Superman decides to teach him a lesson. But rather than actually like attacking and probably killing Aquaman, Superman enlists the help of Wonder Woman and the Green Lantern to literally lift Atlantis from the ocean and set it down in the middle of the Sahara Desert, as far from water as he could possibly get on Earth. Honestly, he might as well just put them in space. All of that would just be like direct murder and everyone would have gotten mad at that. But like, honestly, I don't think Superman is above that. This guy is a frickin' monster.
Number 7, Tower of Babel. JLA Tower of Babel is a Justice League storyline, and one of the best storylines in my humble opinion. Written by Mark Waid and illustrations by Howard Porter, Batman is the greatest detective alive. Odds are, if you're ever in a room with Batman, he's already thought out your every move and he's planned his accordingly. He's always 2 steps ahead. That's what makes him the best. He also just happens to be the sole reason that everything goes in this storyline. He doesn't mean to, but it happens. So Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins launched this huge simultaneous attack on every member of the Justice League of America. Now the attacks are so specific, they're aware of the weakness of each League member. Now Batman was once worried that one or all of them could go rogue at any point, so he had contingency plans in order to take them out if that day ever came. So Talia al Ghul broke into the Batcave and stole those files. So if you want to take down some bad guys, here's exactly how to do it. Thanks, Batman. The best files ever. Now we have all the deepest, darkest secrets. Cool. So Plastic Man gets frozen and then shattered. A specifically designed Vibra bullet hits the Flash in the neck and causes him to have seizures at light speed, which sounds like an absolute nightmare. And Superman gets exposed to red kryptonite, and sadly, many more get hit too.
And at 6, Batman's backup plan. At this point, it's pretty well known that Bruce Wayne kept files and tools to destroy each of the members of the Justice League if it was necessary. Though Clark, like I said, wants Batman to have this ability since he fears himself if he ends up getting manipulated or whatnot, like literally every time Brainiac shows up. But the other Justice League members have not given Batman their information or like been like, yeah man, you can do that. In JLA, The Tower of Babel by Mark Waid and Howard Porter, Batman is shown to keep secret records of how to completely destroy each and every member of the Justice League. These records are then taken by Ra's al Ghul and used to decimate the League, proving an ultimate betrayal on the part of Bruce Wayne. Okay, I get it, like I understand the desire to be prepared since, you know, people in this universe seem to be turned by villains like Brainiac on a regular basis, but that's what Task Force X is for. That's why we have a whole game called Kill the Justice League. You don't need to have like a super secret, this is how you kill all of us hard drive that just begs for every single villain to try and steal it. Like, it's kind of stupid how you thought that was a good idea. All you need to do is have it in your brain. You're the world's greatest detective and you couldn't detect that that was a bad idea.
Number 5, the Justice Lords. What makes the Justice Lords darker than the other timelines mentioned so far is the fact that the Justice League actually managed to completely rid their world of crime. While an absence of crime would be a positive thing for most, it's actually alluded that this version of the Justice League went to pretty extreme measures in order to accomplish such a feat. Appearing in the Justice League animated series episode A Better World, Lex Luthor has become the President of the United States and decided to just execute the Flash. That didn't really sit well with the Flash's friends, which is why an enraged Superman confronted Luthor in the Oval Office. Realizing he would never reform Luthor and keep him from committing such villainous acts, he incinerated him on the spot with his heat vision. With the president out of the way and a new method devised to deal with villains, the Justice League rechristened themselves the Justice Lords and went about establishing a new world order under their quote-unquote protection. They eventually came into conflict with the Justice League when they tried to instill their totalitarian rule on the other DC universes, but thankfully they were finally stopped by Superman and his pals, which actually included Lex Luthor, who became instrumental in stopping the Justice Lords and stripping them of their power. Check out this episode for yourself in 2003's Justice League Season 2, episode 22 and 23 as well.
In it for Aquaman and Wonder Woman War. Ha, it rhymes. Ah, look at that, I managed to squeeze 2 Flashpoint numbers onto this list, hell yeah. I mean, they're different Flashpoints, but still. In the animated The Flashpoint Paradox movie in the DC animated universe, the world is much different to its CW counterpart, and like, kinda the general DC universe, mostly due to the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman, who end up being the villains of the movie, thanks to them being former lovers while Aquaman was married to Mera, and then Wonder Woman then killed Mera when she tried to get revenge for her sleeping with her husband. But to be fair, she also wears Mera's crown after she kills her, so it's not really like it was like, oh yeah, it was self-defense. However, this war actually resulted in the destruction of the planet at the exact moment that Barry was able to get enough speed back to get back into the Speed Force and set everything straight. It's a really suspenseful moment where Reverse Flash had just been killed by Batman, so Barry would have enough speed to run back and stop himself from saving his mother. He managed to get into the Speed Force just before the world's destruction caught up with him. It's absolutely insane. It's very Justice League Zack Snyder cut-esque. However, I'm pretty sure they got it from this movie either way. He managed to get back into the Speed Force before the world's destruction, and then the world was destroyed. But, so yeah, it's a bad thing, okay? Even if the Justice League isn't really a thing in this universe, it was still their fault.
Number 3, Superman moves Atlantis. Injustice Gods Among Us issue 12 is the final issue of the first Injustice comic series written by Tom Taylor, and we see Aquaman just unleash the ultimate pain. He's not having an easy go at this time. He's unleashing armies on coastal cities. He's trying to show Superman that he has the power as well, and that he's not gonna allow Atlantis to be taken over. So Superman is like, okay, you think you're the tough dude? No problem. Let me step in. Superman sees this as a threat, and even Batman's like, great, this is exactly what I thought was gonna happen between these two. So Superman doesn't just fly in, fight Aquaman one-on-one, and then settle their differences with this whole ordeal. No, instead Arthur gets the help of Wonder Woman and Green Lantern, and they literally move Atlantis. They move Atlantis like it's new furniture. Pivot! Pivot! They move it to the Sahara Desert, the place with the least amount of water possible. Not cool, guys, not cool.
Penultimately, in at number 2, ruled the world. Usually when people talk about Superman ruling the world, they're talking about injustice. And while that is a great story and an example of what can go wrong with superheroes, the story of the King of the World is actually a good cautionary tale about Superman other than injustice. In the late 90s, this story features a series of prophecy-like dreams that make Superman realize that his regular MO of just flying around and waiting for disasters to happen isn't really working. And Kal-El decides to be a little more, proactive. In this case, that means building a series of spy satellites to survey Earth, helping Superman keep track of everything that's happening all at once, and then giving up his life as Clark Kent to work as Superman full-time. Sleep deprived and losing his grip on humanity, Superman starts interfering more and more in Earth's affairs, toppling extremist governments and even changing the weather. When he realizes that he still can't be everywhere at once though, the Man of Steel deploys an army of Superman robots to help maintain law and order. Again, making him a benevolent dictator. Only snapping out of it when he gets a kiss from Lois Lane. None of the Justice League really tries to stop him either. They just kind of accept it, which is surprising, especially for Batman. Although I find it funny how the Man of Steel deployed Men of Steel. And finally, in at number 1, getting Alfred killed. Look, after Bruce Wayne loses his parents, Thomas and Martha, he's a young boy, okay? The only person who can truly take care of Bruce is Alfred Pennyworth, the Wayne family butler. However, Alfred ends up becoming like a second father to Bruce, raising him to adulthood and caring for him throughout his entire life. He also cares for Bruce's children, as a grandfather, and sometimes even more of a father than Bruce to them. Alfred is incredibly important to Bruce, and probably the only family that the man truly has left. But in Injustice Year 5, number 23, Alfred is spending his birthday alone at Wayne Manor. Unbeknownst to him, Superman has sent the supervillain Victor Zsasz to interrogate him, an altercation which will ultimately result in Alfred's death. I know it was the Injustice Earth, okay, and Supes is a horrible person there, but honestly, think about it. This is the worst thing that Superman, and by proxy his Injustice League, has ever done. Because Alfred is the purest character in all of DC Comics. And in the moment that Alfred died, so did a piece of the DC universe. It doesn't matter if it was in one of infinite Earths and it was one of infinite Alfreds, none of them deserved this.
Number 10, the Super Enemies. Starting off our list today with a Dark Justice League with no comic origins comes the Super Enemies, an alternate universe version of the Super Friends devoted to the cause of deceit, injustice, and terror. The team consists of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Robin, Aquaman, Zan, Jaina, and Gleek. However, they have no morals and are just evil mirrored versions of the Super Friends. In the episode they're featured in, the Super Friends meet these evil duplicates in the Hall of Evil, which is their Hall of Justice. The Super Enemies frequently taunt the authorities, who are powerless to stop them, although the civilian police are actually equipped to just straight up take them down, as they have kryptonite lasers to stop evil Superman. The Superman of the Super Friends universe first met them when he was mysteriously transported into their universe while trying to stop a volcano from erupting, while their Superman was transported into the Super Friends universe. As Superman tried to escape from these Super Enemies and the military armed with kryptonite weapons, the evil Superman was transported to the real universe to fight the Super Friends. Superman Prime ended up getting an antimatter flask that switched them back, which was good news for everyone. And then later on, Lex Luthor organized his own Legion of Doom to be the real anti-Justice League, and it had a much better name. Check out the one-off appearance of this evil team in 1979 Super Friends episode Universe of Evil. Number 9, Conglomerate. The Justice League doesn't always have to consist of the same roster. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a huge Batman and Superman fan, but there is also a smaller and less powerful team called Justice League International. And Mark Waid and Rod Wiggum had them face their evil duplicates in 1992. In the previous story, Booster Gold had just left the JLI to found his own corporate-sponsored team called the Conglomerate. Now that didn't work out too well, and the owner decided to pull new heroes out of another reality to form a new conglomerate of Deadeye, who's an alternate Green Arrow, Fiero, an alternate Fire, Frostbite, aka Ice, Elastaman, aka Elongated Man, Element Man, aka Metamorpho, Scarab, an alternate Blue Beetle, and Slipstream, an alternate Flash. The conglomerate decided to challenge the JLI to a quote-unquote friendly competition that quickly turned violent when they realized the new conglomerate were all from Qward, an evil antimatter world. The JLI managed to get them back into their own world, but it was a very, very close call to say the least. Check out the first appearance of the conglomerate in 1991's Justice League Quarterly number 1, or feel free to skip ahead to 1992's Justice League Quarterly number 8 for the fight of a lifetime. Number 8, Flashpoint. In an effort to stop his mother's murder, Barry Allen created the Flashpoint timeline, a significantly darker reflection of the main DC universe and one of my favorite DC storylines to date. In this timeline, Thomas Wayne becomes Batman after Bruce is killed instead of him, Wonder Woman is like a tyrannical ruler of the Amazons and is locked in a crazy war with Aquaman because she killed his wife, and Superman is nowhere to be found, which means the Justice League technically doesn't exist, and honestly, what's darker than that? Probably a decent amount because this is only number 8, but anyways. If you're not familiar with this timeline, then I highly recommend you check it out for yourself. It is such a good one. All I'll say is that by the end of the series, several major characters are dead, and then in the expanded universe of the Flashpoint timeline, even more characters are revealed to be dead. It's just nuts. Thankfully, Barry managed to fix things before it was too late, but that wasn't enough to erase the Flashpoint timeline completely. Because of that, the DC universe is still dealing with the events of Flashpoint even to this day. Give it a read for yourself, starting with 2011's Flashpoint Volume 2, number 1.
And it's 7, killing Green Arrow. Being as powerful as he is, it's important that Superman keeps a tight grip on his sanity and his powers because, you know, a huge part of the reason that Clark trusts Bruce with shards of kryptonite is because he knows that he can end up being used as a weapon or just going crazy if Lois dies. In this case, he wants Batman to stop him using that kryptonite. However, when Superman goes too far, sometimes nobody's actually there to stop him. In Injustice Gods Among Us number 11, the issue before Superman dropped Atlantis in the Sahara Desert, when the Green Arrow is trying to distract Superman, he fires an arrow at him that bounces off Superman because, you know, it's not a kryptonite arrow, but then it hits his father, Jonathan Kent, in the shoulder. It doesn't kill him. He's fine, he just got shot in the shoulder, but Superman gets so enraged at this that he flies at Green Arrow and immediately starts beating him to death in a furious rage. I mean, like, killing him would be one thing because he's Oliver Queen and he's like one of the sexiest men alive, but brutally beating him is something else entirely, especially with his mother yelling at him, begging for him to stop. Like, dude, listen to your mom, she knows best. Eat your vegetables.
Number 6, Kingdom Come Justice League. In 1996, Alex Ross and Mark Waid teamed up to create the miniseries Kingdom Come. This miniseries was set in a near future where the traditional heroes of the past came together to stop the brutal superheroes of the new generation. The new Justice League of elderly but still very strong heroes like Superman and Green Lantern set up a prison to hold rogue heroes and supervillains alike. Unfortunately, the Gulag erupted in a riot between metahumans that threatened to destroy the entire world, and that caused, let's just say, a little bit more trouble for these geriatric heroes. In an act of desperation, the United Nations launched several nuclear bombs over the Gulag site. Batman and Wonder Woman deactivated 2 of them, but one of them was still primed and falls over the battlefield. Superman attempts to stop the bomb, but Marvel throws him back and stops the bomb himself, detonating it prematurely over the Gulag, killing a lot of the League, cavalry, and many of the inmates as well. What makes the storyline so dark is that throughout the story, the Justice League struggle to follow their own morals, even as they impose their own brand of justice on a very unhappy world. Batman in particular sided with Lex Luthor to quote-unquote liberate mankind from the Justice League. In the end, Superman saw his failure, but only at the cost of thousands of lives. Check out the entire miniseries for yourself, starting with 1996's Kingdom Come, number 1.
Number 5, Wonder Woman hunts the Huntress. The Injustice universe shows us a different side to our team members, sometimes a little darker than we're ready for. So in issue 21 of Injustice Gods Among Us Year 3, we find our main supers in a world that's not so bright. And when it comes to issue 21 of Injustice Year 3, DC shows us yet again how great Wonder Woman is at cracking that lasso of truth. It's just a matter of where she cracked it, that was the problem. Well, she wraps it around the neck of the Huntress, and the crack that we hear is exactly what you think. Bam. So Batgirl calls her out for being a murderer, even though she really didn't mean to do it. Accidents happen, especially in the middle of a battle, you know, it happens. I mean, the tension was high. The Huntress was punching through shields. Wonder Woman just reacted in a violent way. It happens, you're a superhero. I remember one time I wrist shot an orange hockey ball through a garage door thing. It's like, you know what? When you're in the middle of it, accidents happen, you get crazy.
Number 4, the Injustice League. Back in 1988, we got introduced to a new version of the Justice League known as the Injustice League. This ragtag group consisted entirely of criminals who never actually made it big in their various enterprises, and determined to make it big, they just banded together and became the rather ineffective Injustice League. Major Disaster, Big Stir, Clue Master, Multi-Man, Clock King, and the Mighty Bruce are what made up the roster. They barely managed to pull off any capers and mostly just got their butts kicked. Oddly enough though, after 2000 Silver Age, the Showcase #1 came out, it retroactively made 1989's Injustice League the second version of the team. The quote-unquote original team was brought together in the Silver Age by the evil intergalactic Agamemnon, who used Lex Luthor to recruit other villains like Black Manta, Bizarro, and the Joker. This Injustice League was way more effective and even managed to switch minds with the JLA on one occasion. When the Justice League managed to switch back, they erased the memory of the event from the villains' minds completely. Check out these two teams in 1989's Justice League International #23, or head over to 2000's Silver Age Showcase #1.
Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Injustice. I think the whole Injustice Earth is enough of a sin to earn a spot on this list. Just the entirety of the Injustice world is truly an injustice. In a parallel universe, the Joker tricks Superman into killing his pregnant wife Lois Lane and detonating a nuclear weapon that destroys Metropolis, killing millions of people. Mad with grief and rage, and because, you know, Lois Lane died in this universe, Superman goes dark and murders the Joker, quickly losing his moral compass. 5 years after this moment, Superman has formed the One Earth regime to enforce global peace through fear, and rules the Earth as a ruthless dictator with an iron fist. Or I guess a steel fist. Get it? Because he's the Man of Steel. Anyway, alongside many other heroes and villains, he recruited or forced into joining him and killing any who oppose him. Batman ends up establishing the Insurgency, which is actually supposed to oppose Superman's regime, and then that's why he exposes his identity. But then the ensuing war between the factions just leaves the Justice League disbanded. But either way, this is probably one of the darkest timelines.
#2, the New Reichman. Ever wonder what would happen if Superman didn't crash land in Kansas and instead he crash landed in, I don't know, Germany? Well, wonder no longer, because on Earth 10 that is the reality. On Earth 10, the Germans used Superman, known as Overman in this universe, to win World War II and basically take over the world. As a champion of Germania and the leader of the New Reichman, Overman is accompanied by Brunhilde, Earth 10's Wonder Woman, Leatherwing aka Batman, Blitzen aka The Flash, The Martian, Martian Manhunter, Underwater Man aka Aquaman, and Overgirl aka Supergirl, who was unfortunately killed in battle. Alongside the German forces, Overman conquered the world in less than 20 years, after which he decided to leave the Earth for a while. 3 years later, he returned with a clear head and saw all of the damage he helped cause and became an advocate against all that he once stood for, well, still working alongside them for some reason. Eventually, German scientists used callus cells to create a clone of him known as Overgirl that Overman loved like family. However, she died not too long after her creation, and this hit him hard. Inconsolable and grief-stricken, Overman leaked some precious information to the freedom fighters that resulted in the demise of the New Reichman and Metropolis as well. Check out probably one of the saddest Superman stories I have ever heard, starting with 2015's The Multiversity Guidebook, #1. And #1, the Crime Syndicate of America. Consisting of Ultraman, Owlman, Superwoman, Johnny Quick, and the Power Ring, the Crime Syndicate of America is the first alternate version of the Justice League to ever come to life following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. That event erased the multiverse but left the Antimatter Universe, also known as the Quardian Universe within DC's continuity. Within the Antimatter Universe, the Crime Syndicate existed as an evil version of our favorite superheroes, only they were far more dastardly than their previous versions. With virtually no one to oppose them, they managed to establish and maintain control over a large portion of their Earth. Eventually they grew bored of their Earth, and the Crime Syndicate began kidnapping people from the 52 multiverse matter-based worlds and were visited by our Justice League to retrieve the people from the Justice League Earth that had been kidnapped. Fast forward past some pretty sweet fights and we see Owlman along with Superwoman and Ultraman banished to a prison subdimension while Johnny Quick and the current Power Ring were captured. Highly recommend you check out the storyline for yourself, so check it all out in their first appearance in 2000's JLA Earth #2.
Number 10, Old King Phoenix Thor. So some people say that this would probably be the most powerful version of Thor. And oh boy, it's probably true. Imagine Thor with his own powers, but also the power of the Phoenix Force. That's when you get Old King Phoenix Thor, who just also looks really, really cool. This Thor is a lot older and wiser, but ends up getting defeated by Wolverine, who was harnessing the power of the Phoenix Force. But then Wolverine ends up getting killed by Dr. Doom, and it is given to Thor. And I mean, the rest is history. Number 9, Rogue Thor. Okay, so this version of Thor comes from Marvel's What If series. Something a lot of fans will become a lot more familiar with because they're making a Disney Plus series about it, with MCU characters, which will actually be really cool. So, this one tells the story about what if Rogue, the X-Men, had the powers of Thor. In the story, Rogue ends up killing Thor by absorbing his powers and then kind of goes evil. I mean, she goes on a killing spree, killing a lot of people. It's not all bad though. She doesn't stay evil forever. I mean, the spirit of Thor eventually convinces her to use her powers for good, and she does. But come on, she went crazy, and it happened, but just not in the main continuity, of course, because that would just be really, really dark. Number 8, Frost Giant Thor. Okay, so Frost Giant Thor comes from Marvel's What If series, and during it presents the idea of what would have happened if Odin got killed by Laufey and raised Thor himself. Loki and Thor still are not really close in this version, but Loki's kind of the good guy. He wants to leave and go to Earth, but Thor doesn't want that and tries to stop him, and he accidentally ends up killing his mother, Frigga. Thor is devastated by what he's done and ends up letting Loki go, and Loki lives a nice life on Earth. I mean, it's pretty dark for Thor, but at least Loki got a happy ending this time. Number 7, Hellbound Thor. Hellbound Thor isn't from Marvel's main Earth. He comes from Earth 5113, or also known as the Dormammu-verse, which is named after, yes, Dormammu from Doctor Strange. In this universe, Dormammu is the ruler and has turned Thor, plus a lot of other famous Marvel heroes, into his minions, who will do anything for him. They all have new looks, and this version of Thor is very, very different. He's like really straight up scary. Now, he wasn't a big part of this story, so there's not a lot of information about him. But look-wise, he has his classic suit, but with a demon face, but he has all of his normal powers. Number 6, Thorion. Sometimes Marvel and DC cross over. It happens, and one time they did, some of their heroes worked together. This was the case with Thor and Orion to form Thorion. He was super powerful, and get this, he is the son of Thanos. That's Thanos and Darkseid merged together. Like, that's so cool, and is probably the scariest villain combo you could ever have. But this isn't technically canon, it's in its own universe, but it was pretty cool to see. It's always a treat whenever Marvel and DC decide to work together. Hopefully we see more of it in the future. Number 5, Revenger Thor. Yeah, it's called the Revengers because I'm getting revenge and you're getting revenge. Do you want revenge? Okay, so that quote was from Thor Ragnarok, but that version of the Revengers doesn't have any connections to Revenger Thor. But I just wanted to put that quote in there because, yeah, it was fun. Alrighty, so Revenger Thor comes from an alternate universe, Earth 10011, also known as the Cancerverse. In that universe, Thor is part of a team called the Revengers. And as you guessed, they are evil. They are basically the evil counterparts of the Avengers, which is kind of cool. They end up getting defeated by Thanos, which is also pretty crazy since they usually end up defeating him. But in this version, or this universe, Thanos is the hero, and he saves the day. 4, Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill, a character that is very popular with fans and long overdue for a live-action appearance. If you are not familiar, Beta Ray Bill is an alien who was able to pick up Thor's hammer. No one was expecting it to happen, but it happened. He didn't keep it, obviously, but he did end up getting his own cool hammer. The whole thing started when Nick Fury sent Thor up to investigate a spaceship, and he ran into Beta Ray Bill, and the two of them were like, hey, fight. But during that fight, he picked up Thor's hammer. Now, he was teased in Thor Ragnarok, so maybe that means that the MCU is slowly leading up to an appearance? I mean, only time will tell, guys. Number 3, Zombie Thor. Need I say more? No. Number 2. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Zombie Thor comes from the Marvel Zombie series, which was written by Walking Dead creator Robert Kirkman. It takes place on Earth 2149, and on that Earth, a zombie virus ends up infecting almost all the heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. Thor is one of those heroes. So, he looked very cool and terrifying at the same time. But one of the most interesting things about this version is that since he was technically dead, he was no longer worthy of Mjolnir. So, Zombie Thor didn't have it. He ended up getting his own hammer later on, but he didn't have Mjolnir, and that was something that I thought was very, very interesting. Number 2, Venom Thor. Yep, this one is real, like no joke. Venom Thor. Man, just the name is terrifying because you know Venom Thor is a deadly combo. But like Rogue Thor and all the other ones, this one happens during one of Marvel's What If stories. What if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man? In this story, Venom takes over Spider-Man, but then continues to take him over, and then Hulk. But of course, he doesn't stop there. He's like, maybe I should take over some more heroes. And he decides to take over Thor. Venom takes over Thor and gets all of his powers. I mean, imagine if this happened in the main continuity. Venom would be virtually unstoppable because he retains all of the powers he takes. So he would have the powers of Spider-Man, Hulk, and Thor. Who would be able to stop him? No one. He would just rule the earth forever. Number 1, Unworthy Thor. This is one of the coolest versions of Thor, like ever. The reason he is so different is because this is Thor when he is unworthy of Mjolnir. He has short hair, a massive battle axe, ripped clothes, and one arm. His other arm was chopped off by Malekith. and replaced with black Uru. This look was part of the inspiration for Thor's look in the film Thor Ragnarok, which was freaking amazing. This story really breaks Thor down and shows who he is without the hammer. Honestly, it really works, and stories like this help characters grow. And Thor, or known as Son, learns a lot of valuable lessons during this arc, and becomes a better hero for it. I mean, he even fought Thanos during this comic, and it was pretty damn epic. Thor is just so cool. I can't wait to see where Marvel takes it next.
Number 10, Infinity. While Infinity is a story that is much bigger than Thor himself, his role in this story was pretty dark. He was forced to destroy a builder, blowing a clean hole through this alien creature. Thor was sent as Earth's emissary to negotiate their surrender and bow down to the will of the builders. But in reality, the Avengers had a trick up their sleeve and double-crossed the alien race who threatened the existence of the Earth and many other planets. Thor summoned his hammer Mjolnir from far away, smashing a hole clean through the builder's chest and proving just how terrifying of a foe he can be when needed, and how when needed, Thor will not hesitate to kill his opponents, like some other heroes might. After smashing a hole through the builder's chest, he finished them off with a hammer to the head. Splat. Number 9. If he be worthy. Dark stories usually come out of times when Thor is no longer worthy, and this is also one of those times. This story kicked off the 2014 run of Thor, where Thor lost his arm in a fight with Malekith. We were also first introduced to the initially mysterious Lady Thor in this issue, who was deemed worthy when it came to wielding Mjolnir and retrieving it from the moon, where it remained when no other Asgardians seemed able to lift it. Thor's loss of his arm would lead to him being very depressed for quite a while, and would in this case add injury to insult, as he was already reeling emotionally from being unable to retrieve Mjolnir. Although he would eventually get a sweet black Uru arm crafted because Odin refused to accept an armless son. Kinda rude. And likely added more stress to Thor to hear his dad say that. Sounds like, I'm not gonna have a son that's useless. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Just because he lost an arm he's useless? Rude. Number 8. Sundown. This story is both beautiful and dark, heart-wrenching and bright all at once. It's tragic. And hey, just because the story is dark doesn't mean it can't feature electric and bright colors, which of course in this issue comes from the amazing Matthew Wilson. Sheesh, I love this guy's colors. They're always so beautiful. In issue 705 of Mighty Thor, we watch a super sick Jane Foster as Lady Thor take on Mangog, and pretty much kill herself during the fight. In the end, she is forced to sacrifice Mjolnir in order to defeat Mangog, launching the villain and her hammer into the sun. Due to the fact that Jane was battling cancer at the time, every time she changed into Thor, due to that whole process, the progress of her chemo basically gets erased. And when she removes her helmet and changes back this time, she knows it will be her last. Her and Thor share one last kiss as she changes back from Thor to a very sickly and cancer-ridden Jane Foster, and she appears to die. Some truly bleak and beautiful writing here from Jason Aaron. Number 7. Midgard's Final Doom. In 2018's Thor, we get a flip back and forth between a younger Thor and an older future Thor, king of Asgard, but also the last Asgardian left. No matter what this version of Thor does as well, it seems there is nothing he can do to prevent the Earth from dying. But that doesn't mean he's not going to stop trying. In issue number 6, his main threat is a future Doom who is also Sorcerer Supreme in this future timeline. King Thor is joined by his old pal, Phoenix Force Wolverine, who ends up sacrificing his life imbuing Mjolnir with the Phoenix Force in order to help King Thor defeat Doom and save the world. Well, try to save the world. As beautiful as the art is, the story itself is pretty grim. Grim, but spectacular. Number 6. Thor First Thunder. Near the end of this story, Thor gives into warrior madness, and we see just how destructive Thor can be when his rage is left unchecked. He wreaks havoc on Manhattan, nearly killing Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, as well as Jane Foster, while working in tandem alongside his brother Loki. In the end, he regains his senses, but for a while there, it was looking like Thor would have destroyed it all, burned it all, and blown it all down with his mighty power. You do not want to mess with an angry Thor, I'll tell you that much. Number 5. Thor vs. the Mysterious Radioactive Man. This was a story about Thor that actually appeared in the original Journey into Mystery series. Yeah, not all dark stories need to come from present day comics, by the way. In fact, without likely realizing it at the time, some of the darkest moments in comics history have actually come to us from incredulously outdated moments way back in the past. Journey into Mystery gives us one such story and moment. In this comic, we see Thor attempt to take on villain Radioactive Man. In this issue, we find out Radioactive Man's backstory as a nuclear physicist from China who gained radioactive powers. He was then sent on a mission to New York to challenge and defeat Thor. The ending of the story is what is the dark part though. When Thor attempted to send Radioactive Man back to China in a tornado, which Radioactive Man explained would cause him to reach critical mass before he touched down, Thor showed no regard for the innocent lives that could be affected and destroyed by basically the nuclear bomb that Radioactive Man would become on impact. As far as he was concerned, that was Radioactive Man in China's problem, not his. Wow. And he says that in the comic too. Yikes. Number 4, Ragnarok. Or at least one of. This Ragnarok story took place in 1998's Thor, starting in issue 80. It was part of the Avengers Disassembled event. Here we basically saw Thor take on a resurrected Surtur, who was brought back by Loki. Loki, what did you do? Surtur and his army took on the gods, defeating them one by one. Thor learned, however, that this was all part of a cycle and that the gods were destined to fail and be reborn, giving energy to those who sit above in shadow. In other words, the gods of the gods. The story ends with Thor disrupting this resurrection cycle by basically destroying a tapestry, but at the supposed cost of his life and the lives of his people. At the end of the series, he's believed dead by his fellow comrades and heroes, though in reality he wasn't quite dead yet, but instead was revealed to be in a slumber-like stasis, resting before returning. Number 3, the Devourer King. This is the first arc in Donny Cates' Thor run, which just started earlier this year in January of 2020. The series started off with completely giving him a new dark look and dark and immensely powerful villain to go along with this look, who we'd see fully revealed at the end of issue number 4, the Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague. The Black Winter is the cosmic force that was known for wiping out the entire universe prior to the one that we have now, way back when Galen became Galactus. In fact, Thor is even forced to team up with Galactus in order to take on the Black Winter, and the frightening thing is, by comparison, both of these characters appear small, standing next to the celestial shadow of a monster that is the Black Winter. And also, Thor is pretty OP at this point, so that's something. Number 2, the God Butcher. The whole universe wasn't threatened by this villain in Jason Aaron's run, but all of the gods certainly were, and I mean all of the gods. In the story arc known as the God Butcher, we were introduced to Gorr, a fearsome and well-written villain. Gorr learns of the gods and basically blames them for everyone's suffering, and so sets out on a mission to kill them, armed with the Necrosword, also known as the All Black, which we later discover via Donny Cates also happened to be the first symbiote. It's all connected, ooh. Which I love. Gorr at one point also threatened all of the gods' existence with his own god bomb as well, which would kill all gods across all timelines and realities. A pretty scary reality for someone like Thor. Number 1, the Mighty Thor, Lord of Asgard. Or I guess you could just call it Lord of Asgard. I think we all know what we're talking about when we say that. This story quickly becomes quite dark. Thor ends up taking over for Odin as King of Asgard after his father is killed in a battle by Surtur. In this story, we saw Thor not only command Asgard, but also decide to conquer and rule over Midgard, aka Earth. Those who oppose his rule are severely punished, locked away, or killed, and Thor basically becomes a tyrant. He also marries Enchantress and has a son with her. Eventually he realizes how awful his actions have been and how wrong he was when his son Magni, who has fallen in love with a human woman, confronts him. In the end, Thor decides the best course of action is to change the timeline so that none of this ever happened, erasing this bleak story and therefore causing it to be considered an alternate timeline in retrospect.
Number 10. Why is he unworthy? What better way to start off this list with actually talking about why the heck there is an unworthy Thor in the first place? As some of you know, Gorr the God Butcher was a rather significant enemy for Thor. He killed many other gods and threatened to end them all, and he was fueled by his belief that gods were full of hubris and pride and that the universe would be way better off without them. Even after Gorr's defeat, this idea would haunt Thor, and it ultimately came back to strike him again in a fight with Nick Fury on the moon. Nick Fury, along with a few other characters including Thor, had all learned secrets from the eye of Uatu the Watcher, with Nick Fury learning of Thor's own self-doubt after his fight with Gorr. So in the climax of Original Sin, all Nick Fury had to do was whisper in Thor's ear that Gorr was right. These 3 words were enough to riddle Thor with enough self-doubt to drop his hammer and become unworthy. Number 9. Jane Foster. After Thor became unworthy, his mighty hammer Mjolnir ended up in the hands of Jane Foster, who was dying of cancer. Picking up the fallen hammer, Jane became the new mysterious wielder of the power of Thor, and became one of the coolest iterations of the character in my opinion. The original Thor initially came into conflict against Jane, but eventually accepted that the hammer was no longer his to wield. He believed himself unworthy of his own name, which to him was more of a title. He passed the title of Thor off to Jane Foster, not exactly knowing who she was, and decided to go only by his surname. Number 8. Odin's son. After giving up the name or mantle of Thor, this unworthy Thor decided to now only go by the name Odin's son. And you know what? There is still a hell of a lot of power behind that name. Even without Mjolnir, Odin's son is still half Elder God and half Asgardian, and an extremely strong Asgardian too, considering he is the god of strength. He also still has more stamina than almost all other Asgardians. He is still incredibly durable, still incredibly fast, still immortal, still a master warrior, and he is still able to wield the lightning. Beyond that, he has the help of his allies who he has gained over the thousands of years he's been alive. He also has an incredibly cool looking black Uru arm after Malekith cut off his normal arm. Oh, and he wields a weapon he is still all too familiar with. Number 7. Jarnbjorn. Jarnbjorn was the dwarven forged battle axe composed of Asgardian steel and created for Ranna, one of the original members of the Valkyrie. After she mysteriously disappeared, having been assimilated by the Headless Celestial, Jarnbjorn was stored in Asgard's armory and eventually taken up by the younger Thor a long time before he was ever able to wield the mighty Mjolnir. Eventually, after a lot of stuff involving Celestials, King the Conqueror, and the Apocalypse Twins, Jarnbjorn was replaced in the Asgardian armory. When Thor could no longer wield Mjolnir after his battle with Nick Fury on the moon, Thor took up Jarnbjorn once again. While fighting Malekith and a force of frost giants under the sea, Malekith took Jarnbjorn from Thor and used it to cut off his left arm. Odin's son is a weapons master, familiar with every Asgardian weapon, but when he becomes unworthy, it makes sense that he would go back to wielding this awesome axe that was his faithful weapon in his youth. Number 6. Tooth Gnasher. When Thor became unworthy to wield Mjolnir, he also lost the powers it bestowed on him, including flight. As such, he needs a bit of help from time to time. While he has many friends and allies across the universe, everyone knows that a boy's strongest connection is with his giant Asgardian pet goat. Tooth Gnasher is one of a pair of goats that are pets to Thor and who, in the mythology, would help pull Thor's chariot. In the unworthy Thor story, his one goat, Tooth Gnasher, is Odin's son's companion, mainly used to help Thor travel through space and fly to where he needs to go. But he is also perfectly capable of helping Thor in battle. He is an Asgardian goat, and as such is super goat strong. He's even capable of damaging Mjolnir. Obviously, Tooth Gnasher is capable of traveling between the 10 realms and both running and flying at super high speeds. And we love this awesome space goat, yes we do. Number 5. His quest? In the unworthy Thor story that was Odin's son's main solo Marvel run, we learn that the Hammer of Ultimate Thor had survived the incursions and traveled through universes to eventually land in the 616 Realities Asgard realm, which is currently in ruins. Odin's son learns that the whole ruined realm of Asgard has been taken by an Elder of the Universe, the Collector, who is trying to wield the hammer for himself, but he is unworthy. Obviously. Odin's son travels to the Collector's ship and battles furiously against the Collector and some of Thanos' Black Order, mainly Proxima Midnight and Black Swan, and a mysterious third character. While Odin's son is worthy of this ultimate hammer, this is not his hammer. And after using lightning to defeat the villainous forces, he decides to bring Asgard back where it belongs and leaves the ultimate Thor's hammer here, where a certain somebody wields it to become War Thor. Number 4. Beta Ray Bill. Almost as if the unworthy Thor story is a greatest hits, a lot of the best and favorite Thor characters show up here. One that everybody loves to see is the last existing Corbinite and wielder of Stormbreaker, Odin's son's worthy brother, Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill first showed up way back in Thor number 333 in August of 1983, and he was the first character to ever be worthy of wielding the Hammer of Mjolnir, as far as I'm aware. Bill meets up with Odin's son when he discovers that Asgard is no longer where it should be and has been taken by the Collector, and he fights alongside Odin's son to both help return Asgard and to help Thor wield his new hammer. Beta Ray Bill is an amazing character. He is crazy powerful, and while not native to Asgard, he is loyal to both Odin and Thor, even offering up Stormbreaker to Odin's son when he realized he had become unworthy. A better friend you'll be hard pressed to find. Number 3. Mangog. Sometime after the events of Unworthy Thor and after Jane Foster Thor had been challenged by the Shi'ar gods, the Mangog, one of the most powerful entities in all of Marvel Comics, was released and resurfaced, attacking War Thor when he reclaimed the Ultimate Universe Mjolnir. When Asgardia's Watcher, Heimdall, lowered his head for a moment, Mangog attacked with blinding speed and fury. All the defenders of Asgardia tried their best to defend their home. Odin's son stood by his father's side, but they failed to stop this creature. Odin's son assisted Jane Foster Thor in fighting the monster while his people evacuated Asgardia. In order to put an end to the Mangog, Jane fastened it to Mjolnir with an unbreakable chain and hurled them into the sun. Since his action resulted in Mjolnir's destruction, Jane returned to her human form and passed away due to her cancer. Number 2. Thor again? Unwilling to let Jane go after she passed, Odin's son attempted to channel the god Tempest to use its power to revive her. Odin joined him too, since he had seen the hesitation within Jane's own soul at the gates of the afterlife, and they were successful in bringing her back. With the destruction of Mjolnir and her inability to continue as Thor, Jane convinced Odin's son to rise up again and reclaim his name and identity. Odin's son finally became Thor again, but alas, he still did not have his mighty hammer. Not that he needs it to be the amazing character we all know he is, but still. Number 1. Worthy again. In order to find a way to overcome the returned Malekith, Thor nailed himself to Yggdrasil, the world tree, which had taken root in the sun. Because that makes sense. After sacrificing his left eye and the last shards of Mjolnir in his possession, Thor figured to recruit his older and younger selves, the ones that he had defeated Gorr the God Butcher with. The 3 of them were joined by Jane Foster, who had temporarily returned to her Thor form by the rebuilt hammer of the War Thor. During battle against Malekith, who had empowered himself with the Venom symbiote, the god Tempest manifested in the sun and Thor commanded it from Earth to reforge Mjolnir in an extremely awesome moment. The hammer came down and landed right in front of Thor Odin's son, and he, having realized that his struggle to become worthy in itself was what made him worthy, picked up his hammer. Thor used Mjolnir to deliver the final blow that defeated Malekith. After this awesome heroic act, Odin stepped down as Asgardia's Allfather and appointed Thor as the new Allfather of Asgardia. Awesome.
Number 10. Superior Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man is an alternate version of Spider-Man who actually hails from the reality of Earth 616 as well. Superior Spider-Man was the name given to Otto Octavius' version of Spider-Man, which came about after a plot to steal Spider-Man's body was successful. Otto's body was failing, and so he decided to live on by swapping bodies with Peter Parker, which meant that Peter's consciousness ended up dying in Otto's failing body, while Otto's consciousness got to live on inside Peter's young and healthy bod. However, Peter managed to convince Otto to be a hero before he passed away, and so Otto set out to do so, aiming to be a better hero even than Peter had been. Of course, Octavius in the end wasn't really cut out for heroics, although he did do his best. He struggled at times with making the right choices and was also prone to doling out more severe forms of punishment for villains and using more sinister methods when it came to keeping the streets safe. In the end, he chose to relinquish the title and body back to Peter, who still managed to live on via his subconscious, which still remained attached to his original body. And friends, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it, be sure to let us know by smashing that like button. I mean, there's definitely a lot of evil Spider-Man out there, so I'm pretty sure we could keep going with this one. Number 9. Symbiote Spider-Man. While technically still 616 Peter Parker, Symbiote Spider-Man could be considered an alternate in the sense that it was a very specific version of Peter, or a very specific time in his life where he took to using more brutal and violent tactics to deal with criminals. This was of course brought upon by the alien symbiote who had bonded to Peter and who he had mistaken for just being a new suit initially. Eventually, Spider-Man in his black suit realized that the suit itself was alive and had kind of taken him over. He fought hard, sought out help, and would eventually become separated from the suit, who otherwise did not wish to leave him. In so doing, Spider-Man would unwillingly create an even worse villain in Venom, at least initially. Venom might be a hero now, but of course he did not start out that way, instead being a determined and relentless enemy to Spider-Man in his early years in the comics, who also sometimes was prone to cannibalistic tendencies and threats. Number 8. The CEO. In an alternate alternate 2099 reality we see explored in the video game Spider-Man Edge of Time, Peter-Man actually ends up being the big villain. In this reality, Peter goes on to become the CEO of Alchemax. His goal was noble, but kinda selfish and also kinda messed up. He hoped to use Time Gateway technology to channel quantum energy and bring back the lives of all of those that he'd lost. In this reality, Peter Parker was still Spider-Man, but either faked his death or just let everyone believe he had died so he could work behind the scenes as Alchemax's CEO, getting everything in place so that he could eventually put his own plan into motion. This version of Peter ends up getting erased from time after Miguel O'Hara's Spider-Man beats him up and manages to basically reset young Peter's story, thereby convincing Peter to never become the CEO of Alchemax and preventing this evil future self from ever existing. Number 7. Asset 42. Asset 42 was likely one of the first clones ever made by the Assessor of Miles Morales. This clone was considered to be a burner clone and only lasted a few issues, but what a roller coaster of a ride those few issues he appeared in were. This evil version of Miles Morales first appeared in issue 17 of the Miles Morales Spider-Man series, and shortly thereafter perished in a fight against Miles. Miles seemingly kills Asset 42 in this fight, but in reality the clone was revealed to have only really been made to last for about a day. So it's highly likely that even without fighting Miles, he would have just died, as he was already breaking down and basically turning into liquid-like goo, as is evident in his final fight against the original one and only Miles Morales. Asset 42 was in league with Ultimatum and helped to kidnap the real Miles for that villain. Number 6. Ultimatum. Ultimatum is an evil alternate version of hero and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Or really, he's the main counterpart to Miles, who hails from Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe. Ultimatum is the version of Miles that existed on Earth 616, his 616 counterpart. 616 Miles was a criminal who allied himself with the Kingpin. Growing up and belonging to a crime family, he proved his loyalty to Wilson Fisk and was permitted by the Kingpin to later on retire, because he was so loyal. However, after his wife died, he decided to do what Kingpin himself had ultimately decided against when it came to his dead wife Vanessa, to find an alternate version of her in the multiverse who was alive so that he could reunite with her. Miles ended up in the reality of Earth 1610 as a result. Eventually, he would return to Earth 616, only to find that Miles of 1610 had emigrated there. Ultimatum at this point decided to set things right and planned to send Miles and his family back to 1610, taking back his rightful place as the Miles Morales of 616, and aiming to become a prominent criminal and villain in New York thereafter. Number 5. Salim. Recently, Miles Morales got his own clone saga in his series Miles Morales Spider-Man. It turned out that the Assessor had made clones of Miles after capturing and studying him. This batch of clones was unstable, and after escaping were on the hunt to find a cure using any means necessary. Salim was sort of like the leader among them, and he ended up at odds with Spider-Man Miles and Spider-Man Peter. Due to being raised while rapidly aging by the Assessor, Salim and his brothers were kinda messed up and kinda misguided and kinda evil. They inherently struck out at Miles and Peter when the two groups of Spider-Men crossed one another's paths. After Miles mistook their found cure for a serum to make more clones and ended up destroying it, Salim decided to kidnap Miles' baby sister, Billy, in order to lure Miles to him. With only a few hours left to live, Salim wanted to face Miles, hoping to prove that he had successfully been created to be the superior version of him, despite being otherwise unstable and defective, as so many clones have been and often are. Number 4. Kraven the Hunter. It's not just Doc Ock who's taking a swing at web slinging when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Kraven also once decided to step into Peter's shoes and become Spider-Man for a short time. This was during Kraven's last hunt, when Kraven seemingly had killed Peter and then took his place to prove that he was the better between the two. Kraven's approach to heroics was even more brutal in my opinion than Otto's, with many villains ending up fatally injured after Kraven attempted to get rid of them. In the end, it was revealed that Spider-Man wasn't actually dead, but had simply been given a drug to put him in a hibernation-like state after Kraven had disposed of him. Eventually, he was able to rise from the grave and return only to find out that Kraven had been making a mess of the Spider-Man mantle by adopting it in his absence. Kraven would end up basically surrendering, content with his last hunt, believing that he'd accomplished everything he had set out to do in his life. This story and Kraven's time as Spider-Man ends with him taking his own life. But don't worry, this is comics, so of course Kraven would be back. Number 3. Pestilence. Pestilence hails from an alternate AOA, Age of Apocalypse reality, the reality of Earth 5701. Here, Spider-Man ends up being chosen to become one of Apocalypse's 4 Horsemen of Death. He takes on the role of Pestilence, and this much more evil version of the character, allied with mutant supervillain Apocalypse, also really looks the part too. He has fangs fangs, which are poisonous, and 6 arms, really looking more like a Spider-Man than most of his heroic counterparts typically do. Here, Peter was actually chosen to become one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen because he was considered so inherently good at heroics and as a person, I imagine. Apocalypse chose heroes he identified as the best among them to become his horsemen in this reality. Number 2, Spider Doppelganger. The Doppelganger, or more specifically, the Spider Doppelganger, or the Spider-Man Doppelganger if you want, was originally an enemy created by the Magus during the Infinity War event. He was one of the many evil doppelgangers created to fight against the superhero community, which opposed Magus in the conflict. Although, like many of the other doppelgangers, the Spider-Man Doppelganger would die during Infinity War. He wouldn't stay dead though, as so many of the other doppels had. Instead, Spider Doppelganger ended up being resurrected by Demogoblin and would end up joining with him for a time, acting as his sidekick and being treated kinda like his pet. Spider Doppelganger would also go on to team up with such villainous spider enemies as Carnage and Shriek. In fact, he'd actually become for a time very close and loyal to Shriek, who treated him as though he were her own son. Number 1, Norman Osborn. On the reality of Earth 44145 lives a version of Norman Osborn who becomes imbued with spider-like powers and abilities. Of course, this being Norman, he decides to use said power in his pursuit of more power, not inherently being the hero type. Peter Parker, who used to work for Norman, reveals his plan to Norman's son and Peter's friend Harry in a letter. This leads to Peter's death, which in turn motivates Harry to fight his father. Norman Osborn as Spider-Man would go on to team up with Superior Spider-Man and Spiders-Man briefly during the Spider-Geddon event, but would end up partnered solely with Spiders-Man after suggesting that to defeat the Inheritors, they simply trap them on our 616. Obviously, as that was Superior Spider-Man's homeworld, he was not really down for this plan. Number 10, Man-Spider. Man-Spider is a version of Peter who ended up mutating and having multiple arms from the main continuity. It was a pretty freaky time in Peter's life and happened after Spider-Man tried to create a cure to get rid of his abilities and return him to his normal old depowered self. Unfortunately for Peter, this definitely did not work as planned and instead just left him with 4 arms instead of 2. Basically the opposite of the desired effect, leaving him more freaky than normal, which was kind of what he was going for. There is a version of the 4-armed Spider-Man who actually ended up keeping the arms instead of getting rid of them, and he hails from the reality of Earth 1298 and is known as Man-Spider, obviously. I'm guessing that having a secret identity would be pretty tricky for someone like Man-Spider. Number 9, Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man had an upbringing among monsters, and for that reason can be considered kinda monstrous. His appearance isn't super monstrous, although he does share his editorial name with a series that seems to feature a pretty frightening looking mainstream Savage Spider-Man, which we may or may not talk about later. Savage Spider-Man of Earth 83043 ended up getting his powers from growing up in the Savage Lands. His story is that he was lost there after the plane he was on with his parents crashed. His parents died in the crash, but young Peter survived and was taken in by the giant spiders of Savage Land, whose toxic bites helped him to build up both an immunity to toxins and also granted him spider-like superpowers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you haven't already, please head on over to Facebook where you can follow us there as well. It really does help us out here and it helps us out there, so yeah, just help us out. And also thanks for doing that. If you've already done that. You're like, I get it, Amanda, you say it every time. Just want to make sure you know. Number 8, Scarlet Spider. Kaine was one of the clones of Peter Parker that we got to know in the Clone Saga. He typically goes by the mantle of Scarlet Spider now, which at one point was actually used by another Peter clone, Ben Reilly. Initially in the comics, Kaine was presented more as a villain, or at least a misunderstood villain. He misunderstood hero. He wasn't really completely a straight up villain, but he did some shady things. He was a clone that was basically defective, and as a result his degeneration messed with his mind. He also came with the Mark of Kaine, which was pretty monstrous, which allowed him to seemingly burn the skin of those he touched, typically leaving his Mark of Kaine on their face. In reality, this was just a variation of Spider-Man's wall crawl power, as when Spider-Man crawls on walls, this is because of little hook hairs basically in his hands and feet, which allow him to stick. See the Sam Raimi movies for that in person. Similar deal for Kaine, but he was using this to basically melt people's faces at the time. Number 7, Ghost Spider. Not to be confused with the other Ghost Spider, Gwen Stacy of Earth 65, this Ghost Spider is an alternate version of Peter Parker from Earth 11638. In this reality, Uncle Ben did not die and was there to help mentor Peter Parker as he continued on his journey as a hero. Peter here became not just a celebrity and an icon as a superhero, but was also a successful business owner and a philanthropist. However, in secret, he and Ben were working together to lure other Spider-Men from other realities to their world so that they could zap them of their power, killing them in the process in order to bolster Earth 11638 Spider-Man, transferring their powers to him and making him stronger. In the end, Spider-Man of Earth 616, who fell into this trap, helped Earth 11638 Peter Parker to see the error of his ways. Having a change of heart, this version of Spider-Man sacrificed himself to save 616 Peter, ending up in a coma as a result. He was returned to life by an alternate Sorcerer Supreme who needed his help, and then came back as the Ghost Spider, who kinda looks like a blue flame Ghost Rider. Number 6. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man comes from his own self-titled series, which spins out of Non-Stop Spider-Man. So, if you wanted to read Savage Spider-Man, I'd recommend going back and reading that first. I think it's only like 5 issues, so it's also not too long. This story, I believe, is part of the mainstream continuity, so technically the Peter Parker that we see here in his monstrous form is in fact Earth 616 Peter Parker. In the Non-Stop Spider-Man series, there was even mention of the Beyond Corporation, which also helped me to really cement this, at least in my mind, as part of the main continuity canon. I mean, I saw it was kind of listed as that, but I was skeptical, and then I saw that and I was like, nah, no, it's probably main continuity. I think we can definitely say it's main continuity. So hopefully I am right and not wrong about that. But while this is technically 616, it's also a very specific look and time in Peter's life, like back when he had those 4 arms, which we kind of touched on earlier. So I figured I could count it for the purpose of this list. It's also where our thumbnail for this video will likely come from, so thought it might be cool to explain it if you're like, hey, well, what's that thing? That's Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man is Earth 616 Peter Parker mutated by the drug known as A+, which typically improves performance at the cost of intelligence for most users. However, for Spider-Man, due to his unique physiology, it also turned him into a kinda like part man, part spider monster hybrid thing. Poor Peter. Number 5. Spiders-Man. Spiders-Man is definitely one of the creepiest ideas for an alternate Spider-Man that we've seen in maybe ever. This version of Peter Parker was actually consumed by spiders, but his consciousness was also absorbed by them. So while physically he's gone, mentally he kinda like lives on in them. He's literally a Spider-Man made of spiders. Hence the name Spiders-Man. He has a tragic backstory, but don't feel too bad for him. He also would be the one to team up with a Norman Osborn version of Spider-Man, plotting to betray the rest of the spider army that he had been recruited to. And he also, as a bunch of spiders, seems to enjoy kinda eating people, a taste he developed as time went on. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of the vilest alternates of Spider-Man around. He shows up during our exploration of the Spider-Verse, where we learn that he is a fairly sadistic alternate of Peter Parker, whose hobbies include things like burning ants with a magnifying glass on hot sunny days, and spying on his neighbor whom he's kinda obsessed with, Sarah Jane. Patton, of course, is likely twisted in part because it is heavily implied that his uncle mistreats him. He is bitten by a spider, but instead of gaining miraculous abilities that all in all make him a more responsible person and a hero, he becomes a spider-like creature, mutating and becoming more monstrous and murderous, both inside and out. Yikes. Number 3. Poison. Poison is an alternate version of Peter Parker inspired by the Spider-Man story The Other. He hails from a what if where we explore the idea of what would have happened had Spider-Man rejected his connection to the spider within and rejected instead of embracing his role as a spider totem. This would have left Peter vulnerable basically to outside attack. Trapped within his cocoon with no way out, the symbiotic being that we often refer to as Venom sensed Peter's vulnerability and saw a chance to merge with him. Venom then leaves his current host Matt Gargan to forcibly connect with Peter, and together they become Poison. Poison is horrifying and attempts to recruit Mary Jane as his partner, but after she rejects him, he believes that the corpse of Gwen Stacy will suit him better. Oh dear. Number 2. Matt Gargan. Matt Gargan is known as the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, but at one point he too became an alternate version of Spider-Man, albeit a really messed up and twisted version, as he served as Spider-Man for Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, which was primarily made up of villains posing as heroic counterparts. In Mac's case, the heroic mantle he was made to fill in for was Spider-Man, although he wasn't so much Spider-Man but kinda like an alternate Venom posing as Spider-Man. His suit was made of the symbiotic being known as Venom, who was merged with him at the time, and was also like really juiced. But Norman fixed it so that he wouldn't appear as juiced. He still kinda got like a little giant. He got a little giant when it came to him attacking people though. This often turned Matt Gargan's Spider-Man into a horrifying monster who threatened to, and often actually did, devour those people who stood in his way, even sometimes almost eating his own teammate, which obviously they did not like. Number 1. Eye-Apec. Eye-Apek is known in Marvel Comics as Eye-Apek the Decapitator, and was once worshipped as a god in Peru. Remember how we talked about Man-Spider earlier? Eye-Apek is like a more terrifying version of that being. He is typically known as having pointed teeth, snakes for hair with multiple arms, and his lower half being the hairy body and legs of a spider. He ended up getting recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers to act as their Spider-Man after Matt Gargan was Spider-Man, because this was a different version of Spider-Man, a different version of the Dark Avengers, after Norman Osborn escaped the Wrath the second time, this time successfully, and then attempted to resurrect Hammer and bring back the Dark Avengers. Eye-Apek was made to look more humanoid, more like Spider-Man with a genetic formula, except for the fact that, you know, he had 4 arms still, so almost like Spider-Man, but not quite. Later on, he would also be coerced into serving on Luke Cage's Dark Avengers, which were kinda like DC's Suicide Squad at the time.